Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the April 19th, 2016 meeting of the Los Gatos Town Council Parking Authority. Let me first ask you and remind you to silence your devices. I will note for the record that Council Member Rob Rennie is participating in our council meeting remotely, and ask now the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Marcia Jensen.
Here.
Councilmember Rob Rennie.
Here.
Councilmember Steve Leonardis.
Here.
Vice Mayor Mariko Sayak.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Barbara Spector.
Here. We always have special guests lead us in the flag salute, and this time we have two special guests, and so I'm going to ask to come forward Walker French and Olivia French. Have one of you on each side of me here. Don't usually get two folks. This is cool. They are twins, and I'm going to start with Walker over here on my right. He is a student at Hillbrook School. He is in the 8th grade. She is also at Hillbrook School and in the 8th grade. Let's start it a little differently now. Walker, what does he like to do? His favorite activities, his favorite subjects? He swims year-round, plays water polo. Academically, he's most interested in history, particularly European and Scandinavian history. He enjoys photography and the digital arts. And on the weekends, and you can start looking out for him now, on the weekends, you can find him in the Los Gatos Hills, deep in the woods, photographing our wildlife. Round of applause. Now Olivia. She's also in the 8th grade at Hillbrook School. She also swims year-round and practices 4 to 6 hours a week. Academically, she is most interested in English, math, and science. And when she has time, she loves to write short stories, bake goodies, and listen to the soundtrack from Broadway musical Hamilton. Round of applause. Now, if you'll all stand and join us in the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm going to have them introduce themselves to the other council members. One more round of applause. I actually never recall having twins before, but maybe it's my short memory. Now, once a month, I get to say this because we honor our small business. It's a business that has served Los Gatos well, a business that has been here for a long time. And this evening, and before I say what the business is, Los Gatos, the town of the cats. And we all know if we walk around town at 8 a.m. in the morning or 5 or 6 p.m. in the evening, we all also know that besides cats, we have a lot of dogs and puppies around Los Gatos. And so at this point, I would like to bring forward the recipient of this month's Small Town Big Applause Award, Los Gatos Dog and Cat Hospital. Come on up. This is pretty cool. I mean, it's not like he packed the people or I packed the audience with, their fans. This is just like natural. This is
like our waiting.
Dr. Kyle Frandl, who is like, when he's not being a doctor, he's a comedian. And I did just want to share a few things before I turn the mic over to him. The Los Gatos Dog and Cat Hospital could very well be one of the oldest long-standing business in Los Gatos. It was founded in 1947 by Dr. Martin Fairmont, and then Dr. Kyle Frandl here worked with Dr. Fremont and took over the practice in 1980. The business not only takes care of our dogs, our cats, our pets, but also supports many community foundations, including nonprofit groups, including the Cancer Walk and Eric Drew Canine Foundation. So again, this is a commendation signed by all members of our council. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. It's nice to see a lot of our clients here this evening. But 68 years in the community is something we're very proud of. Los Gatos has been a tremendous asset to our business, and we certainly appreciate everybody who's here. We couldn't do it without the staff. We have a staff now of about 45 people, and so it's a busy place. We love serving the community, and we certainly get more out of it than we'd ever expected. So it's a great place to work. It's been a great environment. We've been before the council several times as we've grown and remodeled, and really respect the help that we've gotten in our development. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda, I'm going to ask someone to come forward, and then I'm going to turn the meeting over to her for a little while. I go back up and sit in my place up there. Joanne Telesfor, would you please come forward? Joanne is going to help us and oversee this evening our next agenda item, which is Poetry Month student readings, which is actually another one of my favorite things in our council meetings. And those of you who, well, maybe the one or two of you in the audience who don't know Joanne, she was the former arts coordinator for Los Gatos Union High School, who began this program that we're going to be experiencing this evening when she was an English teacher. Is that right? No?
I was for elementary school district.
Oh, okay. For the is the rest of it right? Okay. Well,
Close.
close. Okay.
We're working.
Well, very good. Well, your students will probably do much better.
Yeah, I know. Thank you so much. So this is a really special evening for me as well. So 6 years ago, when Los Gatos declared National Poetry Month here in Los Gatos, to go along and align itself with the poetry that is celebrated in April throughout the nation. And I was that arts coordinator for the elementary school district. I worked with the English teachers who were preparing their students in learning about poetry and writing it. Well, it made a natural connection then to bring those students and actually have the opportunity for those students to present their poems and honor this month. And I look around me and I'm seeing all the paintings from the high school, actually, and this definitely is an appropriate time to have the students with them. And so, by the way, I'd like to thank the town for their continued support of this tradition. It's very meaningful to the students and the teachers. And tonight, it's my privilege to present 3 students who wrote poems and were selected by their teachers out of a pool of almost 300 kids to be here tonight. Simone Stout and Samara Stout are 8th grade English poetry students. And by the way, yes, they are twins. Although Simone let me know that she was the older twin. So we have twins tonight. This is great. And then we will be hearing from Yvonne Hornung. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. And he is actually a seventh grade student who has written his poem in Spanish. So we're going to be having that presentation now. And thank you again to the town for letting us do this. With that, I'd like to have Simone.
At first, it is a victory, but then it's a demand. It screams, do better. It yells, do more. It cries, be the best. If you could do it once, you could do it again. Again and again and again. Victory is carried on the back. It shakes the legs and stumbles the feet. It causes the strongest to fall on their knees, begging, please. She kills off the weak and tortures the laurel bearers. The tyrant makes her soldiers calloused and blood-driven. To look down from the podium has a price. It steals relaxation and peace of mind, and only in the last moment is it realized how defeating it is to conquer. The poem title is The Defeat of Victory. Hello, my name is Samara Stout. My poem is called Changes and Stays. It is about when over time or certain events can change significant things, but how some things are able to stay constant. Nothing ever changes, except for the days. The people still stay, but now they're traveling in different ways. The sun always climbs the same, only to fall in the opposite place. The battles are corresponding, just now with different names. The warm days are brightening, yet they've been stormed out by thunder and lightning. Everyone's still fighting, though peace does take its face. Everyone keeps moving with the growing age. The past remains lasting, but the future tends to rearrange. Everything changes, except for what stays.
Hello, I'm Yvonne, and for a Spanish class, we had to write a poem of questions, un poema de preguntas. So I chose to have a conversation with my grandfather Ivica by asking him questions. My friend Alejandro, who is my friend, and he's in my Spanish class as well, and he will be acting as my translator. Mi abuelo Ivica.
My grandfather Ivica.
Abuelo, ¿qué es tu mascota favorita de Graña?
Grandfather, what is your favorite farm animal?
Me gustan todos, en especialmente a mi perro Kiki.
I like them all, especially my dog Kiki.
Abuelo, ¿cuál es su comida favorita que cocina de la abuela?
Grandfather, what is your favorite food that grandmother cooks?
Me gustan mucho sarma y sopa de pollo.
I really like sarma, a Croatian dish, and chicken soup.
¿Por qué te gusta montar su tractor?
Grandfather, why do you like riding your tractor?
¿Qué clase de pregunta es esa? Porque es divertido, por supuesto.
What kind of question is that? Because it is fun, of course.
¿Dónde está su lugar favorito en el patio atrás?
Where's your favorite place in the backyard?
Me gusta sentarse en las mesas en el patio.
I like to sit at the tables on the patio.
Abuelo, ¿cuántos tipos de animales tiene?
Grandfather, how many types of animals do you have?
Si es crío. Tenemos pollos, patos, pavos, cerdos, perros y gatos.
6, I think. We have chickens, turkeys, ducks, pigs, dogs, and cats.
Abuelo, ¿quiénes son sus vecinos?
Grandfather, who are your neighbors?
A la izquierda, un joven con perros. A la derecha, tenemos muy buenas amigas que son muy buenos y amables. Tenemos café con ellos casi todas las mañanas.
On the left, a young man with dogs. On the right, we have very close friends who are very good and nice. We have coffee with them almost every morning.
¿Cómo es en Croacia?
What is it like in Croatia?
Me gusta mucho aquí. He estado aquí toda mi vida. Durante el invierno nievia y durante el verano hace calor.
I really like it here. I've been here all my life. During the winter, it snows, and during the summer, it is hot.
Abuelo, ¿cuándo se muere?
When did you die?
El 15 de junio 2011.
The 15th of June, 2011.
Thank you.
Ms. Talasford, did you wish to give us any parting words? She goes, well, now that you called me on it, yes.
It is always a pleasure when we can give voice to the young people in our town. It's important. It keeps us together as a community. And I would like to really give a hats off to the teachers in the school districts, both high school and elementary. And in fact, one of them is here tonight, Grace Patel. Thank you. Thank them.
Thank you all. All right, the next item on our agenda is our commission appointments. And as these individuals leave, I'm going to ask any of you who are standing in the doorway to please come in and have a seat. We have lots of room. I understand you can also sit in the lobby. There are chairs there for you also. So I believe at this point, I turn this matter over to staff. Commission appointments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have from last council meeting a runoff between two candidates for our Arts and Culture Commission, Carol Waite and Peter Dominic, and I will ask the deputy clerk to read the votes for Peter Dominic. If you could raise your hands.
Marcia Jensen and Vice Mayor Mariko Sayak. And Councilmember Steve Leonardis.
And for Carol Waite,
Mayor Barbara Spector. And Councilmember Rob Rennie.
Peter Dominic has a majority vote and has now been appointed to our Arts and Culture Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, thank you for all who applied, and congratulations to all who were appointed. And I encourage anyone in the community with an interest in our town to please apply for our commissions. It's a very helpful opportunity for you and for us. Closed session report.
Yes, good evening. Prior to tonight's regular session, council met in closed session to discuss real property negotiations, to discuss labor negotiations, and discuss pending litigation. As to all three items, no action was taken that requires reporting under the Brown Act.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Council Town Manager reports, beginning with council matters. Ms. Jensen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I participated along with the Vice Mayor in a policy committee meeting between the last council meeting and today, and also in a policy advisory committee for the VTA discussing various projects or monetary allocations for a tax measure that may or may not be passed and may or may not be on the ballot in November.
Thank you. Mr. Rennie.
Three things. The Vice Mayor and I were sworn in at the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Authority, the new JPA agency. I also attended the Silicon Valley Leadership Group CEO Business Climate Conference. There were several other electeds there. And I attended the Cities Association Legislative Committee, the board meeting, and the one where they appoint people to various organizations, commissions, and advisory committees. And I was appointed as the LAFCO alternate from the Cities Association at that meeting.
Thank you. Since the last meeting, I represented the town as mayor at a Silicon Valley Leadership Group discussion on Highway 17 and the widening of Highway 17. I, again, as mayor, attended the meeting of the executive board of Rinconada. The county mayors had a meeting last week when what was discussed was the proposed BTA tax measure and also a proposal to increase minimum wage to $15 an hour in Santa Clara County. And also attended with the manager, the West Valley Mayor-Manager meeting. Is Vice Mayor.
Thank you. In addition to the two meetings that have been reported, I have nothing additional to report on.
Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Since our last meeting, I attended the West Valley Sanitation District Board of Directors meeting on Wednesday, April 13th. It was a general business meeting. I also attended the Santa Clara County Treatment Plant Advisory Committee meeting on April 14th, and that was also a general business meeting with nothing significant to report.
All right, thank you. Manager matters.
Thank you. I'd like to invite the council and the public to join us for Spring Into Green on Sunday, April 24th from 10 to 1 o'clock. We've got a lot of exciting activities. This is our annual sustainability event, including a tree planting, and we invite all of you to join us on Sunday morning. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point on our agenda, we have our consent calendar. All the items on our consent calendar will be decided under one motion unless somebody from the council or from the community pulls an item or items from the consent calendar. This evening, our consent calendar consists of agenda items 1 through 4. Beginning with the council, does anybody want to pull an item from the consent calendar? Seeing no one. I don't have a card, but does anybody from the community want to pull an item from the consent calendar? Seeing no one coming forward, may I have a motion? Ms. Jensen.
I move approval of the consent calendar with respect to item number 4, specifically that it be continued to May 3rd, 2016 to discuss a possible amendment to our smoking ordinance.
All right, a motion made by Ms. Jensen, seconded by the Vice Mayor. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Oh, wait a minute, we can't do it that way. Mr. Schultz, why don't you explain how we are going to do our votes tonight?
So as you know, Councilmember Rennie is participating by teleconferencing. The state law, the Brown Act, which regulates how we handle our meetings, allows for teleconferencing by a council member. One of the requirements, though, under that state law is that a roll call vote has to be done as opposed to just announcing whether it was unanimous or not. So for voting for this evening, we'll have to ask for all those in favor to raise your hands and wait for the clerk to announce actually those that are in favor and then those are against. So for this roll call, you would say, all those in favor, go ahead and they could raise
All
their
right,
hands.
so now we are looking all in favor of the motion for the consent calendar. Please raise your hand.
And now the clerk will announce the names that have had their hands raised.
Councilmember Jensen, Councilmember Rennie, Councilmember Leonardis, Vice Mayor Syak, and Mayor Barbara Spector.
All right, passes unanimously. Thank you. We are now on verbal communications. At this time, anyone in the audience who wishes to talk with us about any item that is not, see, the big word here is not on our agenda, you will have 3 minutes. I do have some cards for verbal communications. John Shepherdson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Why so much traffic in Los Gatos? In 1999, the state increased in pensions, and particularly safety officers got 3% per year, and they could retire at 55. Los Gatos matched those state pensions. Saratoga did not. Los Gatos has lots of police officers. We now have an unfunded pension liability. Well, in 2003, we had a 0 unfunded pension liability. Now it's about $40 million. The Los Gatos police budget is $15 million a year. Saratoga's 5, Cupertino 10. Cupertino is about double our size. So now Los Gatos is financially dependent on big developments, looks like I spelled that wrong, to fund the big police budget and our big police budget pensions, which equals more traffics. So as a community, we have a choice. We can keep our big police budget fully serviced. I know lots of people like their police department. I understand that. But if we want that, then we have to accept that there is a cost for it. And that is that we need money as a town. So that means we need big developments, which means we are also going to need, the result of big developments is traffic. So big police budget, traffic. We really don't have the right to complain about traffic. We're really sort of approaching it not rationally, because if we're going to spend over here and we're going to need the money in order to fund that, then we're going to need these big developments. This is from a town staff report. The town, this is 2005, the town remains challenged with availability of limited resources to augment the proposed 2015-16 budget and future budgets. So this is not me, this is the town, the staff. And then, so we get a project like Netflix. And the EIR superior alternative was 350,000 square feet. Well, we approved it at 485. That brought in more money into the town, but that's going to then translate into more mandated affordable housing according to RENA. So more housing is going to be coming because of this. So a solution, have at least a third-party independent review of the police department. And if the council's not going to do it, then I ask that the citizens support a ballot initiative for a third-party review.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherdson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
This council is going to work very hard this evening, as it is every evening, to consider seriously everything that's before us. We will listen to what you say. However, for the rest of this meeting and for every meeting, I will ask that there be no response to what is said, no clapping, no jeering, no shouting, whatever. And so I'm going to ask you once, and then we'll see what other alternatives we have if you are not able to do that. Next speaker, Ann Robinson.
Ann Robinson, Charter Oaks, 201 Charter Oaks Circle. Tonight I'm bringing up an issue that I brought up last year. Now that we have a North 40 application in process, I feel it's important to address it again. But first I want to review a couple of statements in the general plan. In the general plan, it states that residents hold proposed development projects to a higher standard because that what is approved in other communities may not be acceptable in Los Gatos. And the general plan states that Los Gatos offers amenities, support, and a high quality of living to all residents. If these statements are true, then please don't allow a developer to put residential units in an area on the North 40 that is a high cancer risk area according to the North 40 EIR. Here is a picture from the North 40 EIR showing the high cancer risk area. Putting residential units in the high cancer risk area of the North 40 is irresponsible. How is holding a development to a higher standard? How is this holding a development to a higher standard? People may say other municipalities are building along the freeways, but is this what we want for our soon-to-be Los Gatos residents? The mitigation measure for the high cancer risk area in the North 40 EIR is to use high-efficiency filtration and ventilation systems. This mitigation measure might work for office buildings with fixed windows, but does not work for residential units with windows that open and areas that kids can play outdoors. When residents open their windows, they will be exposing themselves to levels of pollution that will put them at additional risk for health issues. Wouldn't it be more responsible and safer to put office buildings along 17 freeway to buffer the residential units? My suggestion for the North 40 is to put office buildings along Highway 17, put retail along Highway 85 and Los Gatos Boulevard for a quick in and out needed for retail. Spread out the residential units in the middle of the development through the Lark, Transition, and Northern districts. These residential units will be buffered by the office and retail. Place multiple open space parks throughout the North 40 for the residents, employees, and community. Maybe one with a water feature for kids to play in. Each park could have a theme that could reflect the rural and agricultural history of the site. There's a diagram in your North 40 packet that I just gave you with my suggestions. I also want to give you an example of a high-density development in Los Gatos that I've driven by hundreds of times and rarely see issues with the egress and ingress. I'm referring to the Netflix Aventino development. The integration of the office and residential provides reverse commutes between residents and office employees and allows shared parking, which reduces parking requirements. I have details in the packet on this development. I think this development would work well on the North 40, a type like this development. Please think this current North 40 proposal, protect our current and future residents, keep them safe. That should be a priority of our town council members. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like LIS, Liz, on 120 College Terrace. Or you have 3 minutes.
Lisa Tooley, resident owner, 120 College Terrace, Unit L, Los Gatos. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council, for allowing me to speak regarding Ditto's Lane. As my husband and I are one of 2 adjacent property owners on the College Terrace side, we are intensely interested in the outcome and final disposition of the property. Firstly, I want to say that I support your action surplusing the property, and as I'm aware of the timeline associated with the disillusionment of the RDA. When this began in 2010, even though we were adjacent property owners, we really were not regarded as key stakeholders until we pushed our way into the process. So I come to you tonight to tell you directly and in no uncertain terms that we want to be considered and reached out to and regarded as key stakeholders. I'm only speaking for myself and not the College Terrace HOA, but I want you to be aware of who we are as you discuss, evaluate, and consider the plan for Ditto's Lane. We are a small homeowners association of 12 unit owners. Architecturally, 4 of the 12 including my unit, are standalone single-family homes, and then there are 8 attached units with varying square footages from 1,200 to 3,100 square feet. All maintenance is the responsibility of the owner, including painting, roof, and repairs. The HOA owns and maintains the private road off of College Avenue. In the last year, the HOA installed pavers and in the guest parking spots and driveways at a cost of over $100,000 and have embarked on additional landscaping improvements. This happened because owners approved a $10,000 per unit special assessment for projects to improve safety and curb appeal. In the last 6 years, 6 of the units have embarked on 6-figure home renovations. Our little community of 12 homes overlooking Gatos is comprised of an interesting cross-section of Los Gatos. We have young couples and retirees, parents of toddlers, young children, college-age kids, empty nesters, and single parents. We have a NASA engineer who worked on the Mars rover and a Fisher Middle School student who was a U.S. Junior National Ice Dancer. I assure you that the owners on College Terrace are invested in upgrading our community and are concerned about what happens to Dittos. And looking up the hill further to our College Hill residents, they are equally or more so invested. The town can sell Dittos property at any price without carrying over obligation to the state, and more importantly, the town can support appropriate development without the burden of market price. This is exciting, so let's use this opportunity to maximize public benefit. There are many innovative ideas out there regarding Dittos: a trailhead park, a dog park, soccer field, bocce ball court, and all organizations who have an interest should come forward to the town. Partnerships need to be forged quickly, and I hope there are fast and furious dialogue with partners, stakeholders, residents, staff, and legal, because this is a great opportunity with a short time frame. Would it be possible for a partner to buy the land and then for a usage plan to be facilitated by the town? I also hope that the council fully researches and understands the different constraints and trade-offs before voting on anything related to Dittos. It has many complexities. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony Alarcon.
Council members, public, council members, the public, and staff, thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I would like to concur with the woman representing the poets tonight. I think it's very important that the voice of our youth be heard. Perhaps it's even more important that we as adults are the voice for the children that are not heard or do not realize what's going on in our town. With that vein today, I put on an orange blaze vest because it reminded me of being a crossing guard when I was a child in 6th and 7th and 8th grade. Today as an adult, it reminds me of the increased traffic that we've experienced here in Los Gatos from the result of irresponsible developments in town on Los Gatos Boulevard, from Johnson Avenue to Fisher Middle School. What used to take 10 minutes to get to school, even at school time, is now taking close to 30 at times. In looking at my records, I was surprised to find that Raymond J. Fisher, who was president of a lodge across the street, he was president of our organization in 1954. The middle school is named after him. We are housed at 131 East Main Street. I'd like to point out that back when that building was built in 1954, we did not have the type of regulations that we do today. That building, instead of being 28 feet, 30 feet in height, we probably could have built it 60 feet. I would ask the council, when you look at projects, to use restraint, to look at my orange vest and realize what it means. Caution. Use caution in your approval and common sense. When you're approving such projects, make sure they fit within the scope and feel of Los Gatos. We have a special town. We would like to keep it that way. We are here for the long term because projects affect traffic, they affect our lives, and they affect the schools that so many of us have given to our time and our life's efforts to protect. So please help protect the children of our town and our town's future. And again, look at scope, look at mass, and look at the right uses for certain projects. I was surprised to hear about the cancer issue near the freeway on Lark Avenue, and I think that should bring some caution to us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Olga Smith.
Mayor and council members, staff, thank you for the work that you do on behalf of our town. My name is Olga Enciso Smith, and I live on 157 Holly Hill Way, which is in the corner of Garden Hill and Holly Hill Way, near the North 40 development. This massive development of North 40 will be deadly and cause serious injuries to our citizens. I've been living in that area for over 45 years, and I raised my family there, so I'm familiar with the local schools. I have here the police report that I was hit and thrown down to the ground by a speeding adult driver on Los Gatos Boulevard near Lark. On December 21st, I have a fractured vertebra L1, so now I am a handicap. My back is damaged. Like you, Mayor and council members, I have led an active life all those years here as an activist in our county. I have faith that I will recover because I still want to do a lot in our community and in the world. And that I have faith in your wisdom that will prevent this massive development. More traffic in this area is dangerous for our children and our youth who walk, bike from and to school every day. I have seen that because sometimes I walk to Panera to have coffee with a friend. We had one daddy's death in the corner of Lark and Garden Hill about 5 years ago, and for many years I saw the bouquet of flowers by the family. Please, I plead you to redo the traffic study, and I want to be part of that study. I cannot bend down. All my body has to turn when I have to turn. I cannot put shoes on, and I have to rely on family and helpers to go and front to different places. I had to call a neighbor to please pick me up, and she did 15 minutes to come here. Thank you so much, all of you, for listening, and the community that is here.
Thank you. Marquine Smith.
I agree with the previous speakers that I'm Marquine Smith in Los Gatos on Drakes Bay Avenue. And I wanted to thank you and Marcia Jensen for going to the VTA meetings, and the rest of you have been, I'm sure, too. But I was contacted by the VTA because I filled out their online survey and said that I wanted our half-cent tax, if it's approved, to go to the light rail station that we've waited for 15 years? I don't know, to the Vasona light rail extension, because it would get a lot of the congestion off the freeway. It would save several hundred cars, and particularly with Netflix, I see them on Lark because I live near the North 40 area, but I see them lined up, hundreds of cars to get onto, from Lark Avenue onto 17 to get out of town, because that's their only way out. I mean, that's it. And it's so impacted, it's insane around Courtside. And the JCC and Swim and Racket Club, where people are going for health and recreation, and they're getting all these fumes on them. So my two things are, one is really easy that everybody in town can do, and that is fill out VTA's wonderful online survey that, and say that you want the Vasona light rail station here. That's your number one priority. And two is come to a public hearing. She said that if enough people got together, they would have hearings in Campbell and Los Gatos. And so far, all their hearings are all over the county since we lost Krasinski on the board there, or the VTA board. We don't have a strong, consistent voice. You do with the mayors, which is great. But I would like to have us residents also demand transit. I mean, it's a really easy connection now, and BART's coming in, and they can connect to Caltrain, and connectivity is the key, really, to making us not be the Orange County of Silicon Valley.
Thank you. We have a question.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say for Ms. Smith and for the audience, VTA is having a stakeholder meeting on April 22nd regarding the issues that you raise and the allocation of funds. And Mr. Morley, I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly where and when.
At the VTA offices on North First Street in San Jose at 9 o'clock on Friday morning.
Oh, thank you. Good. Okay, since I don't have my pen and paper, that will be the agenda. And I would also like them to have one in Los Gatos and one in Campbell, for heaven's sakes. I mean, they're having them all over town for the residents to easily access. I'll go to that one, though, too.
Hold
Thank
on,
you.
you have one more question.
Okay, yes.
Vice Mayor?
Do you mind sharing the comments that you had written to VTA to us? If you could send it to the town manager.
Oh, sure.
And as well as anyone else in attendance that has any, it would be of benefit to us as we go to these meetings so that we know exactly what the concerns are and that we can represent those accurately.
Thank you. I would say that they were all health, safety, and welfare of residents and the planet, because our greenhouse gas emissions are unsustainable. Ice caps are melting. Not only our grandchildren, but our children are going to have to live with extreme heat and completely different conditions than we've grown to expect. There was an article today in the New York Times about it, an op-ed thing that was wonderful. And so transit-centered development is essential. And we've got one with Netflix. Let's use it.
Thank you. I have no other cards. I will now close the verbal communications portion of our hearing and go to other business. Under other business, we have agenda item 5, Parks and Public Works job number 1331, Almond Grove Street Rehabilitation Project 411-811-0003. Do we have a staff report? Yes, we do. Mr. Morley.
Thank you very much. Matt Morley, Director of Parks and Public Works. The item before you, you do have a desk item with this item that was provided to you late this afternoon. This item is to award a design services contract for finalizing the design on 8 streets in the Almond Grove area, as well as to provide a separate agreement to provide engineering assistance for Broadway and Bachman, the first phase of the project. To recap a little bit of the history, on February 16th, we brought an similar item forward. The council provided us direction to approach the number 2, 3, and 4 engineering companies with the goal of increasing their strength of the design teams, to address the schedule for completion so that we can bid this project next year, and to adjust the costs as necessary. The second-rate consulting firm, Wilsey Ham, provided a strong team, adding twinning engineers as a subconsultant. They also were able to reduce their costs and have committed to meeting the time adjustments. In terms of other items that we've identified along the way, there were some scope items that came to question, including value engineering opportunities. We've provided the second contract so that we can explore those value engineering opportunities as we would like to do in all of our projects. This is the opportunity to do that here, and we'll continue to look at scope through the design of the second phase of the project. We also looked at the communications conduit that was included in the specifications for the project. The conduit is currently in the Broadway and Bachman, and at council's discretion, we can include it in future phases or not. The ideal time to provide input on scope is early in the project, so for the final 8 streets, we are at that point where good direction on scope will help us to finalize that project and move it forward. In terms of conduit, the big question on the conduit is, will it ever be used? And so we look at it as in the sense of an insurance policy. So we don't know if we'll need it. If we do need it, it'll be good to have it there. Keep in mind that if we were to do a lateral cut along the streets, it would be a significant replacement to fairly new concrete streets and could have an impact on the streets, and that's why it was included. We also heard pretty loudly from the neighborhoods in the early stages of the project that a communications conduit for future communications was desirable. Of course, it does come at a cost, and that's the counter to that. Is this a cost that the town council is willing to include within the project? And we're certainly here to hear about that. We have had some conversations with communications companies that have an interest in using conduits throughout the town and can explore that further as well. And that is the summary of our staff report. Again, we're looking for council approval of a design contract with Wilsey Ham for both the next phase and design assistance with the first phase as we look to value engineer that contract. And we're here for questions as needed.
Thank you, Mr. Morley. Questions of staff? Ms. Vice Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Morley, as I asked last week, or last meeting, I suppose, I need you to walk me through how value engineering works. And I understand what you've provided in the staff report, but there was an example that we had presented to us last week about and the numbers may be wrong, but 8 feet of concrete versus 6 feet. And one apparently cost less than the other. Is that the type of value engineering that these consultants would determine for us before we even begin? Or are they going to provide alternate lists that help reduce the cost?
So when we work with a consultant, we ask them to provide us with a design that meets the guidelines that we give to them. In this particular case, it was to provide us with the most cost-efficient and effective way to deliver a concrete street project, and that's what we had and we bid for this particular project. As with any project, there are multiple ways to deliver the project, and depending on the contractor that you have, or the situation at hand, there may be alternatives that the contractor brings forward in terms of value engineering, where they think that they may be able to provide a different service, or the service in a different way that equals or exceeds the scope as we had outlined it initially. Typically, we see this in methodology on how they would deliver the project, and this is a good example. This project is a good example of that, on whether we do one side of the street and then the other, if we do sidewalks first and then street first. All of those things are value engineering opportunities that can save us in terms of the schedule on a project, which is a value engineering opportunity as well. In this particular case, the contractor has provided us with initial proposal that they could value engineer by installing a different thickness of concrete for the concrete streets. As opposed to the originally engineered or designed process, it would be a slightly thicker process with different cut, different thickness of concrete. So that's something that we'd explore. We'd explore it in all of our projects as they come forward. In this particular case, because concrete is structurally engineered and we want to ensure that our new streets last as long as the old ones have, we feel we need assistance with a separate engineering company that can help provide that service, and that's why the second contract is on the agenda tonight. So that's the evaluation we would go through. Ultimately, we would end up with the engineer helping us to come up with validating that the proposed solution is actually equal to what we've already designed, or work with us towards a solution that is.
Further questions? Okay, sir, go ahead.
The second one was on the conduit. Is there any way to have the future consultants or future companies that are interested in using the conduit to pay for it, to pay back into it, if we were to include that in future projects?
There is, and it's a timely discussion, and we have had one company that's approached us for the use of conduit. They actually have made an offer to us to use a conduit to share the use of a conduit that we have on Los Gatos Boulevard. And they would pay for that service. So they came forward to us and offered that. We're currently exploring that opportunity with them, and should it prove to be something that we can work through some of the details with, that we don't disrupt our existing fiber optic cable that's in that conduit, we would bring that to council for consideration and approval. So that could be an offsetting cost to that particular item. We also have, in association with Almond Grove, this week we received an application for an encroachment permit to install a conduit on some of the other streets in the Almond Grove area. And from the same company that's been doing fiber optic installations throughout the town. Again, it's not something that we're sure of. It's the initial application, but we would suspect that they'd be interested in pursuing that and continuing it forward. The advantage to that is that it will allow us to remove that from future scope of other projects, because they'll already have it in place, and we can condition their installation such that the conduit is sufficient for their needs and for ours. So those are some of the things that are at play, but I think it points a little bit to the need of communications conduit, and why there may be, at council's discretion, certainly an opportunity to do a logical or smart installation of conduit in this particular area.
All right, Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. First, I just want to comment for the audience that although my iPad is aimed at the screen, I'm also watching it from the KCAT feed, so I can see the speakers at the podium through that, and the other pans of the audience and so forth. Then my question for Director Morley is, with the value engineering, if the contractor decides they want to make some changes, I assume you then have to go back to our design consultant and use more of their time, and that adds cost. It seems like you've added cost in the newest estimates to the design contractor? Is that because you realize there's more of this value engineering time that's going to be needed from them?
So we did, in your council memo that you have before you today, we do ask for two separate items. One is the agreement for the last 8 streets in Almond Grove, and the other is for falling back to the first 2 streets, because we don't have an engineering company on retainer at this point that can do that engineering for us to do the evaluation. So the extra $10,000 we're looking at is time and material, so we would manage that contractor in terms of reviewing it. They would provide us time and material costs, so for every hour that they spend on it, they would bill us an hour. The idea would be that we would bring items to them where we think we could achieve savings far beyond what the cost of doing the engineering would be.
Further questions? All right, seeing none, I will now go to the audience. I do have one card, Angelia Dorner.
Hello, I'm Angelia Dorner, a proud resident of the Almond Grove. There are 2 contracts as discussed in connection with this concrete project. The first contract is relating to design services for the other 8 streets, as they're referred to. And I just wanted to point out that the contract is calling for $809,000, but that includes $111,000 relating to construction support services, which doesn't have to happen until the bid is awarded for when those streets get constructed way down the future. I've sent you an email on this, and I am recommending strongly that the amount of this design contract be amended to exclude future construction services amounts, and that those could easily be added in a separate construction services contract at a future date when it's more determinable as to what those amounts are. How these amounts could have ever been even determined, I have no idea. The highest and best, there are a few other things in some other emails that I've sent you, but one of the best particular design contract is that they are looking to complete the design work for all streets at one time, so that bidding could be done, if decided, in spring of 2017. I think that is fabulous, because the original phasing, in my opinion, really bear no sense of common sense as to what streets would get done first, et cetera. I believe it's extremely important that streets that provide the highest value to the most town residents, the entire town residents, be considered first. In addition, by having all planned, all of them designed collectively, the contractor can determine what might be most cost-effective from a traffic control standpoint, and pinpointing on intersections versus straightaways or isolated streets, they might be able to come up with ways that could save a tremendous amount of money. Contract is a $10,000 relating to design as well. I think it's important to differentiate between 2 different types of design. I think when most of us think about street design, we think of the big maps and the drawings and driveways and sidewalks, et cetera. This particular design actually relates to the formula derived using soil testing and traffic loads and other expectations to determine the formula of what kind of concrete mix to use to provide the strength and durability of the concrete and the street. As it relates to the full depth concrete, the reason why that needs to look at again, because by doing a different formula to make the concrete, you may be able to get the same strength and durability by pouring thicker concrete and not needing to excavate all of that additional stuff, and save a lot of additional money.
Thank you, and I do have a question, maybe others also. You talked about reducing the initial bid at least at this point by $111,000, basically to see how it all pans out in the future. As you know, this council has been working to set aside funding for Almond Grove. And if we do that, if we take off this $111,000 and look for the future, there would be an issue. It could be less, could be the same, it could be more. But yet, we have been trying to set aside a pot of money just to get it done, and I'm concerned about the uncertainty.
Okay. I think that since the scope of this has been changed in that all remaining 8 streets are going to be designed as one, that all of this work will be occurring over the next, between now and this time next year, so that the awards for, or actually a little bit earlier, so that awards or contracts could actually be done for the actual construction. I'm only talking about really deferring that portion of this contract until spring of 2017, so that all of the design work is actually completed. That $111,000 hasn't been eaten up unawares to everybody by design work. And then it's like, okay, what construction support services really might be needed now that we are entering into a construction contract? And at that point, the design person could be contracted or awarded at that time. So I'm only talking about a year out.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Ms. Sayak?
Could you go back to your last slide?
Sure. And it wasn't my last.
Okay, and so this pertains to, I'm trying to understand, this pertains to the 10,000 additional contract.
Correct.
And so what totals am I looking at? This 1,260,000?
Okay. I am aware, and I have read the email that was provided to you as council, as public document, concerning a recommendation or an idea presented by the contractor to consider full-depth concrete compared to the design of concrete in the current plans and specifications. That particular value-added approach would, in his estimate, was going to save $180,000 before contingency and before construction admin and support. That's just on Broadway and Bachman. Now, the initial estimates that Mr. Boyce and myself came up with as it related to that particular idea was less than that, which is where the 227 comes from. But essentially, you can spend $10,000 now and only an element of that will be used because all the geotechnical evaluations and findings have already been done, in connection with the original design. So we know what kind of soil there is. We know they're just residential streets. We're not talking about heavy truckloads. We're not talking about industrial traffic. We're talking about straightaway streets, not a whole lot of myriad of different kinds of things to deal with. But the engineer, this person, Twining, is being proposed, will actually take that information, and I'm going to call it bookworm it, to say, well, if given this set of facts, what could I do to make the kind of concrete, the actual concrete mix, that would give me the strength and durability to allow a thicker layer of concrete compared to a thinner layer? And we wouldn't need to excavate out all this extra dirt and fill it in with all this extra aggregate base, et cetera. And if we could achieve the same performance using this approach, much, much less costly at the end of the day, as compared to what's in the current design, then hoo-hoo, we all win. If he determines that that isn't possible or feasible, which I've given you an email sort of giving my rationale on how I believe it will be, then great for the town, great for the taxpayers, great for everybody. But if he decides that it can't be done, then we haven't really lost anything more.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you. I have no other cards. Does anyone else want to address us on this matter? No cards, no one coming forward. I'll close the public testimony portion of the hearing and now turn to the council for questions, discussion, motion. Sayak.
Okay, Mr. Morley, bear with me. I'm trying to understand all this engineering. So in what was just presented, the construction admin of 100,000, can you explain how the process works once this contract is awarded? Is this a line item that would not be utilized until absolutely necessary, or do all these contracts get paid under the total sum without necessarily tied to a specific line item?
Thank you for your question. If you look at attachment 1, page 15, which is the contract, it has a schedule of fees for the Wilsey-Ham agreement, and it's lined out into several tasks. I'll give you a second to get there. We'll put it up on the Elmo so you can see it there. Thank you. Thank you. So you can see that there's a schedule of tasks associated with the project. These are allocated in a little more depth as well when the project is bid, to give hours and the associated time associated with each. We actually, the professional staff in Public Works works through these and tracks the consultant as they're progressing with the project, and only pays out the portion of the task that is completed and only the amount that is actually worked at that particular time. Where there is a service that is not needed, so I'll use the separate contract, the $10,000 contract as an example. That's the time and material not to exceed amount, so that it allows us a little flexibility with the hours and time associated with that work. We don't anticipate using all of that. That's why it's just a flat round number. It provides us the ability to manage and track that consultant up to that dollar amount. You can see the same thing associated with each of these tasks. These are the estimates from the consultant on what it's going to take to deliver these individual project line item tasks, and we'll monitor the consultant throughout the project to ensure that they're complying with that and they're not exceeding those costs. Where there is a need to exceed it, that's why we have the contingency, but that all goes through some strict scrutiny on our side to make sure that the services that we've actually contracted for are provided prior to even touching that contingency.
Other questions? Sayak?
So if I understand what you're telling me, for example, task 5 on construction administration, if there were any requests for construction administration, it would fall specifically under that task. And so at the end of the project, we would see how much of that 100,000 was utilized only in that effort.
That is correct, and we track that through the project. It becomes part of the project file that we can report out on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Ms. Jensen?
Just to follow up to make sure I understand. So Ms. Dorner was suggesting that we delay in a certain part of the project to make sure that we weren't doing anything unnecessary, and we would evaluate once we got there. And when I look at this Exhibit B that's up here, I'm just wondering, my assumption is that it's building in the delay. Am I right about that? I mean, that you won't get to a payment, or you won't get to, it's sequential, task 1 first, task 2, and then when you get to the construction, so the delay that is being suggested is actually built into the contract?
That is correct. So as we approach each task and we begin work on each task, that's tracked, and we don't pay on that task until we get to that. So we would pay on that task as it gets to the end. It'd be like remodeling a bathroom and contracting separately for the sink versus for the tile floor versus for the shower. It's not something you would break apart. You would let one contract for the entire project, and you proceed through it. If you had payment schedules, you'd pay as the work progressed.
All right, we are looking for discussion motion. Ms. Sayak?
Okay, I'll go ahead and make the motion then. I authorize the town manager to negotiate and execute an agreement for design professional services to complete the design for the remaining 8 streets in the Almond Grove project to Wilsey-Ham in an amount not to exceed $809,778, which includes the 10% contingency discussed. I also authorize the town manager to negotiate and execute an agreement for construction design services on a time and material basis to support the field design changes for Broadway and Bachman to Wilsey-Ham in an amount not to exceed $10,000. And as they conduct their design, I ask that staff and Wilsie Ham review all the pertinent communication that we have received from the neighborhoods so that all of the concerns that first came out during the first round of design with Broadway and with Bachman, that we do not repeat those same issues. So.
We have a motion. We have a second. Ms. Jensen?
I'll second the motion and ask, I think it might have been incorporated, the maker of the motion, to also request that to the extent that there have been studies done, for example, the geotechnical studies elsewhere, that those get reused so we're not paying for a duplicate study.
Yes, and I would include not only the geotechnical, but all the studies, for example, the tree serve inventory that we did and anything that pertains to this project.
Okay, so are we reviewing all duplicate studies? Anything further? Mr. Leonardis?
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I'm still hung up on the price of the conduit for the fiber optic cable. And the reason why I'm hung up on it is because the cost of this job is still unknown. And I know it's going to be significant. And the cost of adding the conduit is close to, let's say, what, $850,000, $860,000, something like that. So being that the concrete streets were originally budgeted to be $2 million more than the asphalt streets, and then you add another million to that, it's $3 million more, and that's money I feel like we don't necessarily have for that luxury. So my concern going forward is spending the money or allocating the money at this time to potentially put the conduit in the streets. And this goes for Broadway and Bachman as well. It's one thing to have the opportunity to get the concrete streets. I see that now, it's the council's direction. But to add the conduit is something that I'm not interested in spending the money on because I feel like we don't really have it at this point in time. I don't see where it's going to come from.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the maker of the motion. Is the conduit in the amount of approximately $850,000 encompassed in your motion?
You know, I'm glad you actually mentioned that. I can go either way. What I would like, and please, staff, let me know if it's feasible, as your discussions with the fiber optic company on Los Gatos Boulevard progresses, is there a way to find out whether we can be reimbursed for the specific costs and conduits? And so if so, is there a way so we can ask for reimbursement within the Almond Grove Street so that we don't have to worry about expending resources on this line item?
We would absolutely look for the contractors, the fiber optic contractors, to provide us some sort of revenue associated with the use of the conduit. So that would be something, as I talked about, we're exploring on Los Gatos Boulevard, that we would continue to explore on all conduit. I would say that the next stop on this project, as we work through the design on the 8 streets, is back with council for approval of plans and specifications, and so you'll be able to see where we have that lined out. And at that time, I expect that the conversation with the fiber optic company will have matured a little bit, and we'll know a little bit more about what they're going to do ahead of our project on the 8 streets, and then where there might be gaps, and we can have that conversation at that point. And staff will come forward, as we do typically, with the best professional recommendation on where to install conduit.
And I'm going to go back to you. Is the conduit and the $850,000 still in your motion?
So right now, I will include it in my motion, but I will ask staff to highlight what that future amount will be when the design and specs come back for the 8, so that that is something that we can discuss when we look at the total cost of the budget of not only the design, but implementation and construction.
Mr. Morley, is that feasible?
That is feasible.
Ms. Jensen, are you still seconding the motion?
That is fine with me. I'll just make the comment. I look forward to the other information, the additional information, because right now I'm of a mind that it's better to put in a conduit than have to go dig up $1 million streets to put it in when Google comes in and says we're going to give you high-speed internet service and you can't get it in the Almond Grove because there's no conduit. So I would rather err on the side of that, but I very much look forward to the information regarding that issue.
Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I wanted to make a comment about the conduit also. I think there's probably some misunderstanding. I really doubt that a fiber company would come and run fiber from the street to each person's individual house, that it's mostly going to be used for a pass-through, or it may get to a pole somewhere, and then they may go overhead, or they may use a wireless connections to people's houses. So with that in mind, I think there was a suggestion in the staff report that rather than this 800,000 for all the streets, we should look at just like a north-south connection and east-west kinds of connections rather than doing every street. Because I think it's really just needed by these companies to get into the area, not to run to each individual house. If you think about how prohibitively expensive it would be for them to dig up the front yard of each house, I don't think they would go that route. I think there's many other better engineering solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. So for clarification on this for staff, at this time, we're not necessarily committing ourselves to spending the $850,000. We're saying explore the possibility of installing the conduit and see what options are available and who's going to pay for it going forward. And with respect to what Councilmember Rennie just said, can you comment on that?
So that is my understanding as well. So I think, yes, I agree with that. In terms of Councilmember Rennie's comments, what we're hearing as well is that we expect that the request for a conduit through Almond Grove would be to go through the Almond Grove and not to the individual residences. There are some distinguishing factors between who can go on poles and who cannot. The company that submitted their application for a permit this week cannot go on the poles in Almond Grove for several reasons. And so that's why there's the opportunity for folks to want to be underground versus up on the poles. But we will absolutely manage this throughout the design phase, and if this company does indeed install conduit, that takes away about 4 of the streets that we were talking about anyways, and allows us a little bit of a head start from that perspective.
Thank you. Further discussion. Mr. Leonardis.
And one more question about the conduit. So the conduit on Bachman and Broadway is already a foregone conclusion. It's going to go in at this point in time, no matter what?
Yeah, it's our plan to install that conduit, and we've committed to when we bid a contract, we've committed to do that installation. We can attempt to value engineer that conduit out of the project. We would hope that we would get full value out of it, but we can't be guaranteed of that. So if it's the will of the council, we can move in that direction. If the council feels that the conduit and those particular locations is worth the investment, then we would carry on forward.
All right, and I'm just going to say that for this motion, it does not include what Mr. Morley just said about Broadway and Bachman. So we'll go forward with this motion. Saw 2 hands up. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I guess my hang-up with the situation is if you have conduit in Broadway and Bachman, and then later on the rest of the streets, the council decides not to put the conduit in, or there's a different solution, it just doesn't seem like there's parity, and that's has been my issue with this project all along, because it's being put together in pieces. So I'm just having difficulty at this point with that.
Ms. Sayak.
So depending on what you find in your discussions on Los Gatos Boulevard, and if there's an option for reimbursement, couldn't we apply that to the Broadway and Bachman case as well?
We would. I'm sorry.
No, that was the question.
We would anticipate that should a company come forward, they would reimburse us for the use of that conduit, yes.
And when you say the use of it, the actual construction, so that the cost that went into that particular line item would be reimbursed?
Typically, it's the form of a lease, and so we would lease them the conduit, much like you would lease a building. They'd lease that for a period of time at a set dollar amount.
It would actually go beyond even possibly the cost, because even after the cost is recuperated, they're still using. Can very well go past even what our cost is.
Thank you. Further discussion? Questions? Hearing none, we're going to have the vote, and remember, we are voting by show of hands. We have a motion. All in favor, raise your hand.
Councilmember Jensen, Councilmember Rennie, Councilmember, nope, Vice Mayor Sayak, and Mayor Barbara Spector.
Opposed?
Councilmember Leonardis.
Thank you. We are now on agenda item 6. Property location, North 40 Specific Plan Area Phase 1. Consider a request to modify a previous approval of an exception to the story pole policy for Phase 1 North 40 development applications. This is a continued item. It was heard at our prior meeting. Public testimony was completed on that evening, and we are now going forward this evening to obtain additional information from staff. If the council has questions of staff, that would be appropriate, and then we'll go to discussion and motion. Council report, please.
Good evening. I apologize, I'm a little under the weather tonight, so bear with me. We're here this evening to continue the discussion that was started by the council on April 5th in regards to the modification of the approved story pole exception for the Phase 1 development application within the North 40 specific plan area. You have several attachments within your reports this evening. Attachment 7 provides the story pole plan that the applicant pursued to implement this past weekend, but I'm going to focus on attachment 12 within your staff report, specifically Exhibit B.
Can I, is this something that we received today as now a desk item?
Yes, exhibit or attachment 12 is within the desk item. And that attachment shows what was installed on Saturday, particularly in the conflict areas that we're discussing.
All right, thank you.
The clicker. Oh. So for orientation purposes, we are here on Los Gatos Boulevard. We are on the southern portion of the site. Over here off of the screen is Lark Avenue, and this is the 76 station at the corner. So we're going to start with the site here at the southern corner, which is the first conflict point, and that is 2 existing residential residential uses, sorry. So in green, you have outlined where the existing access is for each of the 2 units. Keep in mind that by restricting access to these residential units and as far as vehicular access, you're encouraging or requiring them to back out onto Los Gatos Boulevard. And I would like to point out that Lark Avenue, the right turn lane begins right here to go onto Lark Avenue. I do have my water. Thank you. Sorry, it's not going to go away with water. And so the applicant was able to install, you've got the yellow and the red dots indicate what poles were proposed to be installed within the initial story pole exception that was granted in February. The yellow poles or dots are poles that were installed or modified by the applicant on Saturday. The red ones are ones that they were not able to install. And then you see the orange lines between those 2 represent orange mesh. In this case, there are some sites on the other locations that we'll talk about that they didn't install mesh because of distances between the poles, but we'll get there. Do we have any questions on what you're seeing here on this page?
All right, we're going to start just on this, which is Exhibit 12, Exhibit B, Attachment 12, Ms. Sayak.
So it would be helpful to me as you go through each resident or business to indicate what communication you've had with the current tenant, because that was one of the key things that we had asked. So starting with this one, was there communication with the existing resident?
So the applicant has worked specifically with each of the residential tenants as well as the business tenants. Staff has spoken with this. We did meet the tenants, the husband and wife that live in 15133. I could be saying it wrong. I apologize. It's in the staff report. And so we did discuss with them when we met out on the site. We didn't We didn't end up interacting with any of the other tenants, unfortunately. They weren't present. But the applicant has continued discussions and met with them at many points between the April 5th meeting and tonight. But as far as access and what you're seeing on this exhibit, before I move on, were there any other questions? So we're going to start at the next conflict point. And so,
Would you please give us what attachment or number?
so this is still attachment, Exhibit B of attachment 12. This is just the next sheet in there. And so this is, you're looking at Los Gatos Boulevard here. This is at the northern end of phase 1, sorry. So this is where the new neighborhood street is proposed. These buildings here, you've currently got Enterprise rental car, and then you've got a 2-story office building here. Bartlett Tree Experts, their office is located in this building, and then they use the storage facility.
I hate to do this, especially to someone who is not feeling well, but could you put the boulevard down at the bottom of the screen?
Of course.
So that this will be consistent with what we've done last week and this time.
Just trying to figure out where we start from and show what we're really wanting to show here. So back to, here's the boulevard now on the bottom of the page. So I guess we'll start with building B2 since we're there. This is a proposed commercial building within the phase 1 development. Originally, again, the poles that were proposed to be installed were, again, a combination of the yellow and the red. What they have installed is the yellow dots. Those are poles. And then the blue ones are new proposed poles. So they weren't included in the initial story pole plan. So they have been able to implement an additional pole here at the end of the proposed building. So that fully shows the extent of that proposed building as far as the frontage on the boulevard. And then a pole here to represent the ridge of that building. And then they do have a flag rope that connects those corners. They weren't able to connect the rope to this far corner, but the other items are connected here. Again, we've got the driveway and access that's used by the resident outlined in green here. So this property, this tenant comes in and then does a 3-point turn in order to pull out onto the boulevard to exit the site. And then the last conflict point is there's a residential unit here, rental unit, and then Bartlett Tree Experts uses this rear storage yard for all of their equipment storage for the tree trimming business. Again, what they were proposing to install was a combination of the red and yellow dots. What they have accomplished is the yellow dots, and they do have flag rope connecting these points here rather than the mesh, because that allowed them to actually connect this section here without having to have a pole with guy wires that would conflict with vehicle operations within the storage yard. So they were able to make that connection, but only with the flag rope, because the mesh, the span between the poles would have been too great. We do have, again, the green outline of the access, and it's a combination of Bartlett. So Bartlett comes in, they come down off of the boulevard and through here, and then they enter into the storage yard from this direction, and then they pull out this way. Enterprise rental car uses this area here for part of their facilitating the cars through, and I don't have specifics on that, I apologize, I thought I did. But that is a key area for Enterprise to complete the functions that they provide on the site. And as far as exhibits, that's all I have to walk through with you tonight. If you have any questions on those exhibits, otherwise I'll finish out what I have for you. So staff does believe that the proposed exception meets the intent and the technical requirements of the town story pole policy. The applicant has continued to meet and work with the residential and commercial tenants to install the proposed poles in as many locations as possible, while still providing safe use and access to the properties. It's staff's opinion that any additional poles would conflict with safe use and access and would most likely require the existing tenants to vacate their residences or relocate their business. Letters from several of these tenants are included in your packet for consideration this evening. This completes staff's report. We are here if you have any question, as well as I believe there are some of the tenants here this evening that may be able to answer any questions, as well as the story pole contractor.
Thank you. I would note that because the public testimony was closed last meeting, we are getting all of our information from the staff report, and the public testimony is not reopened, and I would ask council members to direct your questions to staff. Now, do you have anything further before we get to questions?
I don't. That completes everything I had for you.
Ms. Sayak?
So I'm sorry I'm making you talk even
That's
further,
okay.
but
This is just the beginning.
for those tenants that are here that are not able to speak, can you summarize the concerns that they may have shared? I know we did get a letter from from Bartlett. We did get a letter from a resident who said it's no problem. We heard from another resident that is a problem. Can you at least summarize the conversations you have personally had with all of these tenants?
So the only tenant that I have personally been in conversations with, it was the second time I've spoken with them. They'd spoken with me prior to the February meeting as well, as far as just the difficulty of, potentially leaving their residence of 30 years and just the timing of that. So their concern is they've got concerns as far as noise and the long-term ramifications of, and that's the residences on right here. I don't believe they're present this evening for this residence here, sorry. They do have as I understand it, they have a graduation party that they are going to host at their residence for a family member in June, I believe. End of May, I apologize. I was going there, but I thought that was a little early for graduation. And so the length of the story poles and the guy wires associated with that would cause concern with that event that they would like to have at their residence. So that's one thing that they would like you to take into consideration as you look at the timing and as far as requiring the story poles to remain within that location. I have not spoken with the other, sorry. Yeah, the resident that I believe was supposed to be here tonight is this tenant here at the edge of the Bartlett facility. I have not spoken with them. They do have, I know that the applicant discussed the potential for relocation. The problem with that for them, or the difficulty, is that they have pets that make that relocation as far as hotels and such very difficult to coordinate. So they did talk about it and they did discuss the possibility. It just was, it's a very difficult scenario to accomplish for that particular tenant. And I know they've discussed that option with other tenants as well, with somewhat similar results.
Further questions? All right, thank you. Then if there's no further questions of staff, I'm going to turn to the council. Let me start with disclosures. I will start with disclosures. I visited the property last Thursday. I saw the areas that have been discussed by staff, but did not receive any further information that was not already in our staff report, and I drove by the property again today, just in a vehicle. Anything else on disclosures? Seeing none, I am now looking for discussion motion. Council. Ms. Syak.
Okay, I'll start off with disclosures. I did walk the property this weekend, but did not enter since I didn't have permission and it's private property. I'll go ahead and make a motion, and then I'll go ahead and provide and elaborate on the motion. I move to deny the story pole exemption, and in addition to that, before a new planning commission meeting is scheduled, I move that we hold a joint study session between town council, planning commission, special invitation to school board members that are affected by this, and public notice, extensive public notice to the public that are interested in this. The reason for the denial and the reason for this study session, couple of things. One was I specifically wanted this continued to find out what the hardship was to the tenants. And while I am concerned of the possible relocation, I also thought about it the past 2 weeks that there are several options, but that's not necessarily an engineering aspect that we need to deal with here on the council, and that's something that the burden of that responsibility falls on the applicant. The other reason for my motion for a joint study session between council and planning commission is that our story pole policy discusses basically maximizing understanding. And based on all the comments that I've received, based on the testimony we've gotten at the last meeting as well as written comments, is there are many questions that people still have on this project. And before a new public planning commission hearing is scheduled, I think it behooves all of us, the planning commission, the council, the school board, and the public, to be on the same page of information, and that the town actually do that study session, and we be the voice, and we provide that information. If I get a second, I can list out all the things I think should be part of that. I have a long list that I'd like to share with staff, but before going there, I'll see if I have a second to this motion.
Ms. Jensen.
I will second the motion. I think it's a good suggestion. I am very sympathetic to the tenants on the property, but I think it's very important that there be a forum where information on the story poles and the application can be presented with the planning commission present, so there's an opportunity for everybody who is concerned about this to gain information, exchange ideas, and go to where we're going, and just put a little bit of a pause into the progress so that we can hopefully get the right information, or at least what we think, or hopefully the town or whoever wants to provide that information thinks is important information that the decision makers of the town can use going forward as this application gets evaluated. So I'll second the motion.
Further discussion?
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Rennie?
Thank you, thank you, Mayor Spector. My question, a little bit of echo back so I'm in trouble. My question is, I think all of the ones in yellow, the story poles are up, and some of those are creating hardship. So if we slow the process down, shouldn't we say something about whether we take back down the ones that are in the way, or what is our plan for, sort of stopping in the middle?
Thank you. I'm going to look to staff. If this motion were to pass, and assuming this motion would delay the process, what is staff's input on the already installed story poles?
As staff understands it, the motion is to deny the request for an exception, so ultimately they're going to have to put up all of the poles that were part of the original exception. So we would work with the applicant to determine how that could be affected. So we'll work with them on timing. So that may entail removing the poles that have been recently installed, but we will work with the applicant if it is possible for them to leave those up and not significantly impact those tenants. then we will do that, but we will be working with the applicant to make that determination.
Thank you. I have a question to the town attorney. The motion and the second are for a joint study session with the school board, planning commission, and town council. I heard reference to discussions, and the question is, given Brown Act, given the interface between the planning commission and the council, what is your input as to what this joint session would look like legally?
So the Brown Act certainly does allow you to have joint sessions. It would be a publicly noticed meeting, so that does allow you to have sessions such as this as both of them. So from a Brown Act standpoint, it certainly can occur. I do have concerns just on if we're actually is it just to educate on the specific plan, the housing element, and the interactions. That's certainly acceptable. When we start to get into the architectural and site review plan, that's more of a quasi-judicial, and you shouldn't be weighing in on the actual application until those public hearings have been noticed. So that's my main issue with how far we go during this study session. And then the other issue is we do have a vested tentative map that's pending. It does have timelines under the Subdivision Map Act that we'll have to work our way through. I don't have the answers for that while I sit here as to how we resolve those, but certainly staff will be looking very closely as how we can do that as we work through the study session. But in a nutshell, we can make it happen. There might be some parameters about already deliberating on the current A&S in front of you that will be coming in front of you.
Ms. Sayak.
Okay, as the maker of the motion, I certainly didn't plan on deliberating on the current A&S. The way the process works, the story polls go up, scheduled planning commission meeting, they make their recommendation, then we see it. My concern is, let's discuss the current documents that have already been approved, that does not violate any process, just so that as people start to think of what it is that the current application is, again, we're not weighing in, but how do they weigh that against the current documents? And I think it behooves us to provide that informational session, and it needs to come from us. I don't want to rely on a consultant or the applicant to do it. It needs to come from us. We need to provide the same information so that as people move forward to the Planning Commission, they can be informed and they can make constructive and effective comments. And that's the only way I envision a process to be cleaner than what we've already seen.
Ms. Jensen.
As the seconder of the motion, I agree with Vice Mayor Sayak. I was curious of her list of items that she wanted to be presented. I did use the word discussed. I apologize. Study sessions, sometimes you discuss things, sometimes you don't, sometimes you talk at people, but I didn't want to cause any legal problems by saying the word discuss. So I think that the Vice Mayor is going to make clear what she has in mind, and if that comports with my understanding of where she's going, I would maintain the second.
I'm going to also listen to the maker of the motion, but I do have concerns here. And my concerns are, how far is the study session going to go? We do have a specific plan. We do have an application. It's incumbent upon the Planning Commission initially and then ultimately the council to determine whether or not the application is consistent with the specific plan. And so it's not clear to me how a pre-meeting could impact the decision-making of the Planning Commission and then the council without interfering with it. Further discussion. Ms. Sayak.
Well, to that comment, then, I would ask that staff give serious thought to this. Again, I'm focused on the current public documents that are already in existence, such as the EIR. What is in there? What elements went into that EIR? There has been a lot of discussion about the traffic studies and what does it mean when ITE says X? What does it mean when ITE says Y? We need, I think, a better understanding of what those traffic studies are. What were the mitigations involved in it? Based on the EIR, which was very lengthy, there were several mitigations that went into that. What were those? The specific plan, I brought it with me. It's very large. And what does it mean? And I think there's some factual information that needs to be shared. What would a development look like with a specific plan? And frankly, what would it look like without? Because I have certainly gotten comments and questions about get rid of this, get rid of that, and I want to make sure people understand what it is they're asking for. There's been a lot of discussion about a housing element. That's a plan that we've already submitted, and there's certainly lots of questions about that. And we get lots of questions about housing and its impact on schools, which is why I think we need to invite the school board. There are lots of things we are unable to talk about, but why not bring all the parties together to have that conversation? Again, within the parameters of the law, but so that we can educate and inform our residents.
Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I was having a little trouble understanding this motion. I think what the Vice Mayor just said helped me understand a little bit more. If I can put it in my own words, I think you're doing two things. You're denying the exception request, and then number two, you want to have a study session that really enables. You say all the documents we've already approved, so the assumption is we council know it. So really the purpose is to help all of the residents understand the information that's gone before. I think that's a good idea. You know, this has been a pretty long process. And I take it during that, we again, as Ms. Jensen said, we're not going to be discussing, but we might ask a few more clarifying questions. So I would just ask the maker of motion if what I said sounds correct.
Thank you, Mr. Rennie. Ms. Sayak?
Yes, and through the mayor, it is correct what you surmised from my motion.
Further discussion. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I was interested in hearing the bullet points that the Vice Mayor was considering for the discussion or the joint meeting.
Mr. Leonardis, anything further?
That's all.
Okay, further discussion.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, I didn't understand. Councilman Leonardis, you were interested in hearing them, or you wanted to hear them again, because I thought maybe they had been related.
Further discussion.
I do have an additional comment. I just wanted to comment on the mayor's concern that information could lead to prejudgment. I've always thought that information is valuable and helpful. You can't have too much information and you can't convey too much information. So I don't think that leads to prejudgment. I think it leads to people making better judgments. So I think it's important that we provide that information when we can.
Thank you. Further discussion? All right, one certainly can't, as Ms. Jensen said, you certainly can't oppose a motion that is going to relay information. And it is absolutely true that we have heard from many sources that there is a misunderstanding or lack of understanding in the community about the environmental impact report, what it's held, what it decided, what it didn't decide, what traffic studies went into it, what mitigations were put into effect. The specific plan, what it means is probably something that will be decided by the Planning Commission and the Town Council. Explaining the housing element, those are explaining and giving more substance to existing documents and relaying that information to the community, because there certainly is a lack of understanding or somewhat limited understanding, because those of you who are sitting out there or who are listening to us probably haven't been working on it daily for the last 15 years. So to the extent that it will be providing additional information, I will be supporting the motion. Further discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Oh, wait a minute, raising hands, I'm the one who forgot.
Councilmember Jensen, Councilmember Rennie, Councilmember Leonardis, Vice Mayor Syak, and Mayor Spector.
Thank you. Staff need anything further?
No, thank you.
All right, agenda item 7, which is Plan Development Application PD 14001, Mitigated Negative Declaration ND 14002, Project Location 16212 Los Gatos Boulevard. This is comes up from a denial of the plan development application by the Planning Commission. I do have cards on this, but before we get to that, staff report.
Thank you again. Proposed development contains 11 single-family detached residences with an overall density of 10.6 units per acre. The development would include one for-sale BMP unit. Home sizes would range from 2,155 square feet to approximately 3,700 square feet. The planned development, or PD overlay, is required for the project due to the zoning exceptions requested, which are listed in detail in your staff report, but include reduced setbacks and exceptions to the maximum permitted floor area ratio. The Planning Commission considered the application on February 24th, forwarded a recommendation of denial to the Town Council. The minutes of that meeting, as well as the community correspondence on the item, are contained in your staff report. The applicant has taken the community's input into consideration and provided an additional residential conceptual plan for the Town Council to consider this evening, which proposes 8 fully detached single-family residences within the project site. The design does not include details like floor area or setbacks, so any additional analysis cannot be provided by staff at this time. The applicant is looking for specific feedback as to the most appropriate use of the site. While the applicant believes that use is fully residential, he is open to additional direction and looks to incorporate those comments into the project moving forward. Staff has concerns regarding the design and intensity of the project as it relates to neighborhood compatibility. Based on this analysis, staff recommends the council accept the recommendation by the Planning Commission and deny the proposed project. This completes staff's report. We are here if you have any questions.
Questions of staff? Seeing none, I will call the applicant up. Applicant has 10 minutes and could be a person or the person's team.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Town Council. Thank you very much for hearing our project. My name is Scott Ploutz. I am a managing partner for 16212 Los Gatos Boulevard LLC and our president for STEM Development. We had the opportunity to present this to Planning Commission, and we were fortunate to receive a considerable amount of feedback, which is always appreciated because it helps us move through a process and take that feedback into consideration as we move forward and help determine what the best project is for this site. The project was denied by Planning Commission, as staff just mentioned, but we decided to continue to Town Council because we believe there are many different challenges with this site and with the current zoning and PDs and other elements that we would like to get feedback on. And we're hoping that through this process, by presenting the project, looking at some conceptual drawings of what else we have that we could consider and make some positive communication through the process to help us take a next step. And we will make some recommendations at the end as talking points as well. So we are looking forward to moving this through the process. We've been on this for about 4 years now. We do appreciate the feedback, and with that, I would like to start the slideshow. So originally, I'm going to remove this if that's okay. Uh, this project had been to CDAC multiple times through other developers and other property owners historically. A few of these up on the front end here are some of the other renditions. This is a 20-unit proposal. That was one of the original concepts. Then this is a 16-unit proposal as well. This was our first proposal from 2013, and we purchased this property in early 2012. So this was the first rendition, which was 12 units that had a hammerhead for fire access, and we were basing this on some of the other projects that had recently been approved at the time, such as Laurel Muse and the Sand Hill project at the corner of Los Gatos Boulevard and Blossom Hill. After the CDAC and some other communications with staff, we decided to remove one of the elements that was right here, one of the units, to bring it down to 11 units. So this is now getting closer to where we wanted to be. This ingress egress here is what the town requested to get this setback as far away from Los Gatos Boulevard as possible. No matter what this project becomes in the future, this is probably the most preferable ingress egress point for this based upon the town of Los Gatos traffic engineer. And we actually closed this area off over here and left one of the units there. So now we're at 11 units per acre, as opposed to some of the other projects that were 12.8 plus without BMPs, and this does have a BMP on site. These are some of the early concept drawings. This was an original one that was just more of a kind of a mock-up concept drawing as well, and we obviously received some very negative feedback on the aesthetics of this. The purpose wasn't of the aesthetics, it was more the concept of row houses, which is one of the elements of the AHA's plan for Los Gatos. This was a second rendition a year later in 2014, based upon some of the feedback for mission style or Spanish revival style. This has been a popular rendition, which also didn't go over very well, as you can imagine, on Los Gatos Boulevard. And then this was the final proposal that we have in front of you today, which is a 2015 contemporary rustic conceptual elevations. And this is the row house concept of the application that is currently in front of you today and that was denied by Planning Commission. This is the intersection, obviously. Traffic seems to be the primary issue when we talk from the CDAC and the feedback that we've received. Traffic was number one, parking issues were number two, and schools were the third largest in order areas of concern for this site. With that in mind, we followed the lead of the site right across the street, Laurel Muse, and the other site, which would have been right up here, Montecito, and went with the same element. The primary element and reason for this type of a proposal is due to traffic. If traffic truly is the number one concern and element, this is the lowest density traffic impact, and it's actually a reduction in the amount of traffic that will be going on and off the site on a regular basis. Through the development process or any other use of commercial, even its existing use right now, the traffic is much more of a higher density and much more traffic impact in the current state, which is not a problem. But what I'm saying is the use of this has the ability to look at retail, office, residential, lodging, automotive uses, which is it's a historic auto dealership, as well as restaurants. All of these other elements will have a much greater impact. So I think that's important in the consideration of this application. Some of the elements of the Los Gatos goals for Los Gatos Boulevard from the general plan: encourage redevelopment, assemble parcels that have experienced a high vacancy rate. This was a historical high vacancy rate property since the auto dealerships left. We actually have a tenant in there who's paying about 25% of market value. It has the perception of being healthy right now, and people continue to say that, but it is not a good tenancy. Our currents have been in the property now on month-to-month leases for over a year. So that will be changing at some point in the near future, as agreed to when we originally went through the CUP process with the town of Los Gatos. Pedestrian amenities and design were part of the process. Increased residential opportunities in the commercial zones, multifamily residential, and concentrated south of Los Gatos Halmerdin Road. These were all some of the elements that helped us move to these decisions in the design of this plan. transition from higher intensity uses on the north end to lower intensity uses on the south end of Los Gatos Boulevard. This is obviously a lower intense use than what we would see with commercial, so that was another element. Los Gatos Boulevard shall incorporate family and residential orientation. Adjacent residential areas should have some smooth transitions, so obviously the neighbors like having residential to residential as opposed to residential to commercial for most of the direct neighbors. Establish boundaries for the commercial along Los Gatos Boulevard adjacent residential neighborhoods. These are all elements of that plan that are incorporated into this design and concept. This was the original row house style that did not fly well. Here's some pictures and concepts, very high-end, luxurious row house elements. And the community did not like this on Los Gatos Boulevard. There's other applications in town that people do prefer it in, and we continue to hear that same feedback, and we understand that. So what did we do from there? This is the Los Gatos Boulevard. As you transition around Los Gatos Boulevard onto Shannon Road, this is what the traditional single-family homes look like in the back. So what we decided to do was bring you another concept, having the opinion that this is probably not going to fly well based upon a unanimous decision to reject from the Planning Commission. We thought we would bring you a concept. This is the lowest density that we could actually put on this site. It's an 8-unit concept where we actually take one of the units, ingress, egress off of Los Gatos Boulevard for this last unit only, and 7 other units on here as opposed to 11 access on Shannon Road at this time. So this is a fully conforming setbacks, 25 feet here, which as opposed to about less than 10 feet on the other application right now. And this is 15 feet and 20-foot setbacks here now to give the neighbors all the required setbacks that would be for normal zoning. There's a visual overhead. Here's some concept drawings. You'll see that there's a much more green space between the units at that point. These are rough concepts similar to our first concept of the other plan as well. So my last minute here, I'd just like to wrap up and just say that throughout the process, as we transition, if you so decide and determine to follow the Planning Commission's lead and not approve the application at hand, these are some things we would like to use as talking points to hopefully make it productive to move us through a process. And we'd like to have you take into consideration the 8-unit residential proposal as a concept, or a conforming commercial proposal, which we have several of them that people are already contacting us with interest, and we have taken those into consideration. We'd like to request a continuance back to Planning Commission and city staff to refine our design and work out the details of either one of these based on what the best motion is moving forward on this. If you fully conforming commercial is desired to use the property, would require a PD based on the previous council direction, one of the issues that we have open. In all residential proposal, would a general plan amendment be required? And overall, we would appreciate the ability to proceed the process seamlessly as possible to town council's direction under the current application, even if major changes required.
Thank you. Questions?
Thank you.
Ms. Jensen.
I have one question for the staff and then a few questions for Mr. Plouts, if I may. The question for the staff is, am I correct in assuming that the only question before us tonight is the original 11-unit proposal, which we have the unanimous recommendation for denial, and so any further discussion would be new noticing and a different hearing, correct?
That would be staff's recommendation.
Okay. Mr. Plouts, my questions for you are, could you put your first slide up again, please?
Yes, I can.
I didn't think we were going to have to look at all of them, but I just...
Are you saying the first concept
The
drawing?
very first thing you put up,
Sure.
the black and white site plan.
This
There
one?
you go, that one.
There you go.
That is your current proposal, correct? That is what you took to the Planning Commission, that's what the Planning Commission recommended denial on,
That is correct.
correct?
That is correct.
Would you tell me where the optimum quantity and use of open space is on that site plan?
To meet your needs, Councilmember
Not to meet my needs,
Jensen.
but to tell me where on that site plan
Right there.
do I
That-
see the optimum quantity and use of open space?
This would be the primary element that was changed from the CDAC originally when we had that on site, and then Each one of these units has decks and bistro seating on the front as well.
So that
Those
top right-hand corner is your open space?
Yes, a community gathering area for the people that live
How
in the
large is it?
complex. I don't have that level of detail with me.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember. Yeah.
You mentioned the lease that you currently have in place with Artisan Wine Depot, that tenant is paying 25% less than market.
That's correct.
And is it correct that he's paying 25% less than market because the lease was drawn up anticipating his eviction for your project?
I would say that that is an incorrect statement. It wasn't in lease. We were actually allowing him to stay there for 2 years and allowing him to go on a month-to-month after that. It wasn't about an eviction. It was about a short-term notice in a CUP that was defined that way.
Okay, I apologize, but the 25% markdown is anticipation that he will be a short-term tenant, correct?
Actually, the site was vacant, and we were going to use it vacant, and instead we decided to lease it at a below market rate in order to occupy it because we were having some problems with vandals and other people on property.
Okay.
So, yes.
My final question is, you cited a number of policies under our general plan, but you didn't talk about the Los Gatos Boulevard plan. And in that plan, there is an objective that regional commercial and office are to be at the gateways in the north, transitioning to mixed-use commercial with medium-density residential and down to residential south of Spencer. So this your property is north of Spencer, correct?
I would take your lead on that, Councilmember Jensen.
I'll tell you that it is.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
that.
Thank you very much.
Other questions? All right, Ms. Sayak?
If I may, it's a question of staff that may lead to a question of the applicant. I want to understand the process. So the Planning Commission denied the application, and one of the bullet points in Mr. Ploutz's last thing is a request for a continuance back to the Planning Commission, depending on what we decide on. Based on the way our process works, if this was denied, did he have to automatically come to Town Council? There was no way to revise it so that what we're seeing now could have been looked at by the Planning Commission again?
So the application before you is for a rezoning, which the town council is the approving body, deciding body on. The planning commission made a recommendation of denial and forwarded that recommendation to the town council for consideration. The options available to the town council this evening are provided in your staff report. Remanding the application with direction is one of those options, as well as giving direction for the applicant to as far as denying the application and starting over is also an option.
And one other option in that scenario would be the applicant has ability just to withdraw his application after that recommendation and start with a new application. But the process requires it to come to council even if the recommendation was denial. Staff doesn't have the ability to say, why don't you start over? It's the applicant that has to decide to withdraw his application.
Mr. Leonardis?
Thank you, Mayor Spector. On one of the slides, the applicant demonstrated a potential desire to have this be continued by the council back to Planning Commission with a commercial proposal. Being that this is submitted as a housing development, and if the council finds merit in the idea of a commercial proposal, would it be possible for the council to remand it back to planning and say we would like to see a commercial project, even though no such project has been presented to the planning department at this time, or to the planning commission at this time?
Yes, that would be an option.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no further questions, I do have speaker cards, and so I will go to them. Tony Alarcon. And while he's coming up, whoever answered the question, it could be remanded back to the Planning Commission for a commercial development, even though there's no commercial development at play right now.
Correct. It may not be the clearest option, but it is one that is available to you.
Madam Manager?
Yeah, one way to think about it is kind of in terms of tiers. The first question is, what's the best land use for the site? Is it the council's opinion that it should be commercial, mixed use, or solely residential? And then you would decide whether or not to deny or approve this particular application accordingly. Fundamentally, if you decide commercial is the best use, then essentially a denial means the applicant has the ability to file a new application and start over.
Can I just add to that for clarification?
Thank you. And because the clarification helped, because the prior answer made it sound as though this application segued back to the Planning Commission, or could segue back as a commercial.
I think given the iterations that this site has undergone, it would be cleaner if we decide on the 11-unit project and then provide direction that the applicant can consider in terms of an 8-unit project or commercial or some other variation, and then they can go forward.
With the new application.
Correct.
Thank you. Mr. Alarcon.
Yes, Tony Alarcon, 229 Johnson Avenue, Los Gatos. Been a resident since started in '91. In looking at the site, I actually took a picture of it, and when the story poles were up, I wanted to point out that the view of the hills were lost. And this particular development, I think the views of the hills are something that we cherish here in town and something that I would like to see maintained. It's interesting that the developer mentioned Laurel Views, because I was here when that application was approved. And that application and that development with that density, which I call sardines in a can, was promised on the auspice to be affordable housing. And because the lots would be 2,500 square foot lots, they wouldn't generate the same amount of rate of students. Well, we know now that's not true. We know that that development is not a favorite development of the people of the town of Los Gatos, nor many past council members, and I believe current. It's clear to me, with all due respect to the developer, looking at his site, STEM development, he pronounces sustainability. And I believe that the best use for that site is commercial. It should be a restaurant. The town should allow outdoor seating around the restaurant. That way people in that area can walk to a nice restaurant. There's not many restaurants there that they can walk to, except for in the opposing shopping center. That type of development, maintaining commercial, would generate greater tax revenue for the town. It would service the local neighborhoods, which many people have mentioned that they wanted. And actually, it's more profitable long-term than a mere 11-unit development. Putting 11 units, even 8 units, on the 1 acre parcel there isn't a fair trade for the town, nor for the children. I mean, when you look at, they use the parking lot now for pickup, and the wine is nice, you know, with the school and crossing guard, wearing my orange vest here. I would just like to encourage you to help give good guidance to the developer so that he can further develop the property into a restaurant for commercial use to better serve our town, to generate the best tax dollars and the best sustainable long-term profit for the developer. Thank you.
Thank you. Roy Moses?
Good evening, Council, Mayor. Thank you for allowing us to speak this evening. And I spoke on this project when it first came up to the Planning Commission. Some of you may have heard my comments, and my comments are kind of simple. I'm a simple person, but I live at 16529 LaCroix Court. Lived there for 47 years, raised 5 kids, have 11 grandkids, and I love this town. I love this town because of the people, the beautiful area that we're in, the beautiful mountains, and we were very fortunate to pick this place to live that long ago. And now everybody would like to come and live here like we do. Unfortunately, this town cannot absorb all the amount of people that want to come here, can't absorb all the developers that want to build the projects that they want to build here. And unfortunately, I know that most of you on the council were not here when many of these things began years ago. I ran into one of the Yuki family members here at the last meeting And I know he was a little upset because of the things that are taking place, and I understand their feelings because when I came here, they were all farmers that had the land and everything, got to know all those people, and they're beautiful people. And it's their land, and they have a right to do something with it. But unfortunately, the things that are taking place right now, because times have changed, are very ugly in my mind. Because this is a town and not a city. That's my main message. Now, and the one thing I just want you to picture is when people drive through the downtown area or down any area, and when we saw those story poles go up, and that's why you have all the people that are attending these meetings, it's just not feasible. Common sense has to rule. And I appreciate the developers and the money that they've spent and want to make use of that money that they invested, but at the same time, we have to have concern for the citizenry. The children that come down Shannon Road every day to go to school are in jeopardy. Drive that road. I live up Shannon Road a little ways, about a quarter of a mile. And you cannot have this kind of traffic and the rampant things that are taking place without having plans ahead. And I know it's not, you weren't here in the beginning, but this has just gone out of hand. And I don't know what the answer is, mixed-use development, commercial, whatever. But we have to sit down and work with the developer, work through the council, and come up with a feasible plan that's going to work for everybody. And I was a little bit more upset the last time I was here. I'm kind of learning to calm down a little bit. I want to make it work for everybody, but at the same time, common sense has to rule. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Norman Plischke, and I may have mispronounced it, but I'm going to blame it on the way you printed.
Way pronounces my name correctly. It's Plischke. I live at 16770 Magnuson Loop, which is the property directly behind the proposed project. It's that little L-shaped section there. And I live there with my wife and 2 teenage daughters, and we currently oppose the 11-unit project. Felt it was way too dense. I'm understanding he's requesting a variance on the setback to create more space for his units, which would encroach on my property line. There's 7 or 5 trees that would have to be demoed. I have a large cedar on my property that would probably have to be hacked in half in order for these units to fit. I believe a project should have the standard setbacks that are normal for a project, which looks like the new one looks much better. I think the appearance of it doesn't fit at all with any consistency with anything in the neighborhood. I did meet him when he bought the property 4 years ago. I actually loaned him a set of my plans for my home, which is a 1930s Tudor, and he mentioned he might go with that direction for design, and I thought that was wonderful. You know, Tudor houses on that property, so I was for that. And my property, nobody really knows this, but it actually sits 3 feet lower than the level of the project. So anything that goes up, the wine depot there is very tall appearing, blocking the mountains, but I understand that things have to go in and things have to be developed. So, but when that went in, I lost total mountain view. Myself and my children like to play in the backyard. I'm not looking forward to houses right in my backyard, windows, people staring in my backyard. I would request possibly leaving the trees that are already there, not demoing those. Maybe having windows that are obscured so people could not look into my yard would be preferable for me. If I were to go by the square footage he's doing, I could fit 2 homes on my backyard if I were to do that. Yeah. So I think it's, you know, a smaller density, maybe 8-unit development would be much better.
Thank you. Hold on, we have a question from Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you for coming back. Being that you're an adjacent property owner, how do you feel about housing versus a business being there? What would you prefer, or a restaurant?
Well, I would be in favor of a restaurant, actually, because you could probably smell the the cooking and outdoor seating, I probably wouldn't prefer myself, the noise with that. We had a dealership there for many years, and noise was an issue. Car alarms going off, power washing was happening. The depot currently is wonderful. I mean, I would like to see retail. I like to see office space. I think residential, though, would blend with my neighborhood, perhaps. Maybe bring my neighborhood around the corner, which might be nice, but again, the schools are overcrowded. That's a major issue. I understand that. I kind of would like to see leave that building and add some commercial on the front end and just make an L there and create some office space with some retail, perhaps. And it's kind of weird, too. You have a brand-new building that's 4 years old or 5 years old, and it's being torn down already. I mean, everything's Velcro nowadays. You know, it's just like, put it up, remove it. You know, it's kind of weird, I think. It's a waste of money.
Further questions?
Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you. Amy Despars?
I love my new hobby, coming to all of these meetings. Yes, I am standing here again. And I'm asking that the town staff, the Planning Commission, and the Town Council please listen to our community members. Be proactive in preserving what is left of our wonderful town. I'm so passionate about this that I promote it through my neighborhood, through other neighborhoods, through friends. People have said, why don't you run for town council? And I said, because then I don't get to have an opinion. I respect these people up here so much for all the time and energy that you put into everything. I respect those of you that respond to us. I respect you for going out and seeing these developments and putting your heart into it and for reading all of the massive emails that come out. So that's just a lot of time and energy that I respect and I'm very appreciative. And I know a lot of people here are, especially tonight with the outcome of the last North 40 little verdict. But I am asking you to really think about what is going to go in on the corner of Shannon Road and Los Gatos Boulevard. I could go on and on and on, but I'm sure as all you have to do is watch the last Planning Commission meeting to see really what people want. So I don't want to reiterate any of that, but I really recommend if you have not watched that, if you just watch that, it was very evident what the town wants there. And I also really cannot encourage enough. I mean, years ago, I worked on and gave input to the general plan for the Los Gatos Boulevard, and I feel like we cannot develop anything more on the Los Gatos Boulevard until we thoroughly reevaluate what that general plan looks like. It's just now becoming piecemealed with Laurel Muse and what's the new coffee pizza place? Swanson Ford. It's just all kind of getting chopped up now instead of following the general plan. And I would request, which I've done in the past too, is no more medical. We don't need any more medical. On the corner of Gateway, there was supposed to be mixed with medical. We got all medical. And I would also request no more burrito, burger, or pizza places at our end of town. We want another nice restaurant like a Viva or something like that. So when you're considering this, I know tonight is just about the residential, which I strongly disagree with, but when you go to consider, if you look, because it's for sale right now, posted, that it is not being sold as a residential. It is being sold as build what you would like, build to suit, with retail, auto, but nothing that says residential. So please consider that.
Thank you. Dick Cliff? And after Mr. Cliff, we'll have Kathleen Romero.
Yes, my name's Dick Clift. I live at 17670 Torney Road in Los Gatos, 37 years. I'm happy. I came here to protest this, what I thought was an extension to the North 40, but now I see planning recommended a denial on it, which is very good. I think that the most of the small lots in this town around, if you consider a small lot, is around 7,000 square feet if we look at this just residential. So I think this piece of property would justify something more in the 6 to 7-unit bracket. And the proposal that he put up there as his last proposal looked like it had a lot of common sense to it. The only thing that I saw that didn't look good is I see they've changed the setback so that the setback's not right on the street. I think he said 15 or 20 feet, which is a more practical way to approach it. But what I didn't like, what I saw there, is having 2-story buildings on the frontage to Los Gatos Boulevard and Shannon, because it restricts the view to the mountains and that sort of thing. So I think planning and everybody's moving in the right directions. I have no comment on the commercial. I'm glad to see you decided what you decided on the denial, though. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathleen Romero, who will be followed by Bruce McCombs.
Good evening. I spoke as well at the Planning Commission, and I decided it was important for me to come back, rearrange my schedule to come back tonight, just to make sure that everyone understood that I haven't changed my mind. There was overwhelming, as you know, negative input. It's, in my recollection, I don't recall, and that traffic was the only #1 thing. There was the density, there's the height of the proposed row houses, and there was the impact of overcrowding of the schools. So all of that together, because I hear the applicant saying, well, putting in houses actually is the lowest traffic input, but you can't just look at traffic. Again, you've got to look at the density. As I said, it was density for dollars. Put more houses, sell more, make more money, and in particular the impact on schools. So now when I look at the 8 version plan, I have the same reaction. It's better than 11. Same reaction as the previous speaker who said the 2-story is rather massive. You have to go down several blocks on Shannon Road before you find a 2-story house, and the first 2-story house you find is way behind a fence. You can't even tell from the street that it's 2-story. I live almost across the street, 16754 Shannon. My house was built by the Magnuson family in 1920. It was the Magnuson family farmhouse. My garage is still their old barn. It obviously needs some work, and when I get enough money one day, I'll do it. But it's an old craftsman, that kind of cottagey look, that's what you see on Shannon Road. That's what you see on Shannon Road. You go across the street to Laurel Muse, and at least their 2 stories are peaked so they don't look massively square, and where they have a 3rd story, they've gone to basements. So, and in fact, down the street on Shannon, there are 2 side-by-side 1-story houses that are really 2 stories because they have full basements. So, and interestingly enough, there was a piece of property next to my house, which is now built, but years ago, there was to have been a 2-story house built there, and the house that did get built is not 2-story, and it was turned down. And the town, or the Planning Commission, has turned down 2-story houses on single-family properties. So anyway, okay. I guess back to planning to do a better job, I guess, if that's the right decision. But I still disagree with the plan as it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce McCombs, followed by Audrey Christensen.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Town Council. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Bruce McCombs. I live at 16160 Kennedy Road in Los Gatos. Lived here all my life. What a great town. And I just want to thank you right now for the vote that you took regarding the North 40 to give us a chance to take a look at things. And now as far as this project on Shannon and Los Gatos Boulevard, I drive by that site daily, as does my wife. We shop at Lenardi's regularly and do most of our business as much as we can in town in Los Gatos Boulevard, and I'm very familiar with the site. I've known for a long time that wine depot obviously could not support that site. It needs to be developed, there's no question. I'd like to see a restaurant there. I think commercial is the appropriate decision for that project. The building that comes to mind for me is a newly built office building to the right of Planet Orange. It's just to the right of Shannon Road. So if you're coming from town towards Shannon on Los Gatos Boulevard, it's the second building before you reach Shannon on the right. That's just been constructed. When I first saw the story poles, I thought it was probably too massive. It looks right. It looks like they've done a good job there. It's not too anything. So that's really the kind of direction I'd like to see that property be developed. I think 20 houses is kind of out of touch. 15, 11, 8 is still too many, in my opinion. And I'm not making the decisions here, but it's just my observation that this is just too many houses for too small a property. I hope you'll agree with that, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Audrey Christensen and then Barnaby James.
Worthy Council, my name is Audrey Christensen. I live 16751 on Magnuson Loop and have lived there for 40 years. Now, it was my impression that this piece of land was designated commercial. Doesn't seem to be going in that direction. And the idea of putting 11 houses on this small piece of land is absolutely ludicrous. People will be peering into each other's bedrooms. And also, I have two suggestions to make to the council. One is, why not buy the plot and make it into a kindergarten? We shall surely be needing one with all these vibrant young couples. And the other suggestion is that this greedy developer reduce his requirements, put maybe 3 houses on the boulevard and 3 houses on Shannon. And I think we will retain the nature of our town. Thank you.
Thank you. See, if I talk like that, then people would really pay attention. Barnaby James, followed by Markeen Smith.
Good evening, I'm Barnaby James. I live at 16,500 Grant Bishop Lane, so I live directly across the street from the proposed development in the Laurel Mews development. So understanding that Laurel Mews was itself a controversial development, the proposal that the developer made is far, far beyond that. The setbacks that he has are ridiculously small. Laurel Mews actually has a 20-foot setback from the street, and the houses are much, much lower. My house across the street is 20 feet high, and as somebody mentioned, it's a pitched roof, so it comes to like a nice point. These are block-shaped commercial buildings that are 30 feet high, and it makes this intense wall effect along the Los Gatos Boulevard. There was broad negative reaction. I think the developer is a little bit underselling the case that the community made. There were 200 emails, 200 plus emails sent to the Planning Commission. There was very large discussions on Nextdoor about it. The Planning Commission meeting here was far more packed than it is tonight. And I saw angry people stop their cars on Los Gatos Boulevard to shake their fists at the story poles in indignation. I don't believe the developer has made any strong arguments that the zoning change is warranted. He maintains that like traffic was the issue that everyone's concerned about. That also was not my recollection from reviewing people's comments and from the meeting. People mostly didn't agree with the way that the development was proposed. Even the traffic analyst that he brought with him pointed out that the traffic report he had done was based on a simulation from a used car lot in San Diego, and said that the numbers are basically inconsequential, and that it was basically like very little impact anyway, so it wasn't really clear that traffic should be a motivation for the zoning change. I also feel like he misrepresents the plausibility of running a commercial business there. Yes, that place was vacant. On either side of it, there are commercial buildings. Orange Theory opened up and has been hugely successful. If anything, the problem that we have in the neighborhood is the commercial buildings, Yoga Source and Orange Theory have become so successful that we don't actually have adequate parking in the area for all the people that go to them. And actually the tenant, or the developer, is renting spaces to Yoga Source, and so is acutely aware of the fact that yes, one can run a successful business. And I would maintain that perhaps he doesn't have an interest in making it into a successful commercial lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Marquine Smith, and I have no further cards.
I just wanted to share with you a couple of things it's, you know, hearing all these development issues, and some of them are really specific, and some of them are vast, and some of them are small. But there is this thing, you may be aware of it already, but I'm gonna put it up on the. You know about LEED, which is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And they've put out this thing, a citizen's guide for all of us, a citizen's guide to LEED for neighborhood development, how to tell if your development is smart and green. And then they have, one of the things, I can send a link to your council members. I printed it out. It's like 44 pages, but it's in plain English. And so there's a much more specific one for planners and for planning departments. But this is just fantastic because you can use it as a metric to measure any kind of development to see whether it meets this metric. Hold on. It's a really simple checklist system, and smart location being one, which people have been talking about. Preferred location for and whether the trees are saved. I mean, it's just one thing after the next that we all are really concerned with and talking about. And it's cheap, it's free. I mean, we could use this without having to pay any consultants or anything. These people have already done it. If you would like links, I'll send them to you. And I can also leave this. But then one other thing I wanted to show you. This is a giant, like 1.5-inch thick book. At the end of the North 40 discussion, the applicant's lawyer came up and it kind of implied that she would sue us, or it would be possible to sue us if we didn't build enough affordable housing. And she said that's online later on, that group, the North 40 group, said that Pleasanton had lost their suit. Pleasanton won their suit. All the citizens won because they developed this giant thing that's called a climate action plan. And they're limiting greenhouse gases, they're limiting transportation problems, they're doing just fantastically, and it was a result of that lawsuit. And they did get their 29,000, they're much bigger than we are, so they got their 29,000 affordable housing in a way that the entire community came together and supported because it was sustainable. And so I just wanted to share that with you, and that's also online, and I'll also link you emails if you'd like. It's really big to print it out. If anybody wants my copy, you can have it.
Hey, thank you very much. We have a question. Ms. Sayak?
Ms. Smith, correct?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Schultz, do you mind just getting the information on that so that that could be incorporated into our informational session?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. I have no other cards. Nobody's running forward, so I'm going to close the public testimony portion of our hearing. First of all, does anyone have questions of staff? Mr. Leonardis.
I just had a question if Mr. Plouts had an opportunity to come forward.
You know what?
Again.
Thank you. You are just right on top of it. Mr. Plouts, sorry about that. You have 5 minutes.
I won't take 5 minutes of your time, but some of the content that some of the community members were speaking about, I was referring to our early discussions in the CDAC when both now Mayor Spector and Councilmember Jensen were part of those early discussions, and we received multiple times and points of feedback around these projects and development. Through the process, we are still trying to work our way and looking forward to a healthy dialogue to help manage and get to that point. And our real request tonight is the land use discussion. And we definitely understand the amount of negative energy that is around the project that is currently on the table. The reason why we decided to complete the process that we've been working on for over 4 years is to give the deciding governing body, which is the town council, not the planning commission, the opportunity to provide anything that they believe would help move this to a point of development. The project is primed for development, as one of the community members just stated. It is very underutilized. There's many current challenges with it financially, and there's going to be some type of action that we would like to take, and we're trying to keep it in a useful manner that can be utilized for both the current retail tenant. We are currently leasing over 40 spaces to Yoga Source as well to help them. We have many people, bandit parking for lack of a better term is what the term has been going around the community, with people from Orange Theory and the soccer mom minivan concept coming through on a regular time, twice a day. And we are looking for the element of that goodwill while we continue to work on a solution that's in the best interest of the community and allowing the site to be utilized for these purposes. So anything that you can provide to help us move through this process in a seamless manner would be greatly appreciated, so we can continue with the momentum we have. We've taken the feedback from the community of the 11 units and looked at an 8-unit option. Other than that, we do have some commercial options that will be coming forward if it's so deemed by the council, or if they so choose to give us that direction, which would be very helpful. And however, the 8-unit concept that we're bringing to you is the lowest density around traffic. It's the lowest density impact on the site that would have the least amount of impact to its direct neighbors. And anything that would go into a commercial element would have a greater impact, maybe not more than its current use, but it would have at least the same. So those are the points that we're referencing around the schools. Looking at the mitigated negative declaration that was provided was minimal impact at best, even with 8 units. And most of those weren't designed to have people with children in mind. Now with an 8-unit concept, if that is so preferred, it would be even less, as well as traffic on Shannon. So we hope that the council chooses to deliberate and provide some feedback, and we would greatly appreciate it, as that can be one of your decisions on how to move forward. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none. Thank you, sir. Now we close the public testimony portion of the hearing. First of all, we'll start with questions of staff. All right, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead. Oh, I do have one. I'm going to go ahead and make a motion. Mr. Leonardis, you're first.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. So just further clarification, if the council were to uphold the Planning Commission's decision and deny this application, does that mean that he has to come back with a new proposal and he has to file, pay more money and those kinds of things? Or if the council remanded it back to Planning Commission and said some kind of a commercial proposal or a retail proposal or whatever, does the current application kind of just stay open even though the complete context of the project changes? I know you answered that before, but...
So just to provide a little bit more background, under the current fee schedule, all plan development applications are run on a time and materials basis. So whether or not you direct them to proceed with the current application or file a new application, it's irrelevant as far as fees because they would still be run on a time and material basis.
Thank you.
I see Mr. Rennie, but I'm going to go first, Mr. Rennie. If they go back to the Planning Commission with a new application and that new application is not a plan development, would it still be run as a time and materials?
It would depend on the scope of the project if it fell under one of the categories that is defined under our fee schedule for a set amount.
All right, I'll have to think on that. Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I'm going to turn down my speaker a little so it doesn't reverberate. Hopefully you can hear me. There's vacuuming going on in the background here. So my questions for staff is really about the boulevard plan and the general plan. So in the staff report, it mentions the general plan and that this area should be mixed use. My question is, what is in the boulevard plan? And how does that relate to the general plan? And then I have a couple follow-ups.
So the boulevard plan is a little gray as far as this corner is concerned. It does talk about lower intensity uses south of Shannon. And I think there is some reference to Shannon, though, too. But I apologize, I don't have that document in front of me to reference those points. So there is latitude within both documents to discuss both residential and commercial options for this site.
Mr. Rennie?
So my follow-up question is, what does mixed use mean? Does that mean it's housing units built over commercial, or is it commercial in the front and houses in the back?
It can entail all sorts of versions where sometimes it is office and and commercial, office and residential, commercial and office. So it is what it is as far as mixed use, and that division of use does have a fair amount of latitude.
And one more. So the general plan calls for mixed use here. Does it have to be mixed use, or could it be a commercial only? Is it call for commercial only also?
It could be, yes.
Okay, I think that's all.
Thank you. Other questions? All right, now seeing no questions, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to have two motions, but I'm going to bifurcate them. I am going to move that the Town Council accept the Planning Commission's recommendation and deny the plan development application. And that's based on several things. First of all, I don't believe that this application complies with our existing plan development ordinance. And I do not believe that we should be changing the zoning and the general plan designation there in any event. Ms. Jensen?
Are you looking for a second?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to second for the reasons stated by the mayor. Also, to respond briefly to questions from Mr. Rennie, the general plan designates this mixed-use commercial. However, it is zoned restricted highway, and restricted highway, interestingly, the code section says that their uses, quote, those which do not unreasonably interfere with the nearby residential uses, unquote, which means to me that it's contemplated that whatever is developed will not be residential. So, because it's talking about nearby residential, but it allows for retailing and other commercial activities. I agree with the mayor that this does not, I'm sorry, I was going to go back to the Los Gatos Boulevard plan. At the beginning of the document, it has a section titled Objectives, and one of those does indicate that regional commercial and office at the gateways in the north transitioning to mixed-use commercial with medium-density residential and down to residential south of Spencer Avenue. I agree with the mayor that this does not comport with our plan development, our current plan development code section, which requires that an overlay zone is to provide for alternative uses and developments more consistent with site characteristics, et cetera, so as to create optimum quantity and use of open space and encourage good design. I don't think that this project has done that. And our plan development ordinance is under review. It was reviewed by first an ad hoc committee of the council and then an ad hoc plan development committee, and changes to that are pending. Suffice to say, the proposed changes this would be a problematic project under the proposed changes. And specifically, I'm sorry to run on, but this project as proposed would remove 18 protected trees. It asks for 6 separate exceptions to town zoning, including setbacks, floor area ratio restrictions, and even sign ordinances. And the alternate proposal, which I don't think we should consider, is still a residential proposal and a plan development. So on the first part of the mayor's bifurcated motion, I'm seconding for the reasons stated.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, we have a motion and a second on the table. And thank you. Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Again, let me turn down my speakers here a little bit so we don't get the echo back. When I look at this, I think that the first application went to the Planning Commission is way too intense, and the way it faces Los Gatos Boulevard, and like people said, it's kind of like a big square. I agree that it's not appropriate at all. When I look at the 8 units I also think that may be too big. I'm really also thinking that the commercial is really what the Boulevard Plan and the general plan seem to be calling for, and would be more in favor of a commercial or mixed-use development. And the developer mentioned that there would be more traffic with commercial, and that's probably the case. But I think more importantly to think about is when is the traffic. I think that commercial can have a time shift in when the traffic occurs, while housing tends to have its traffic at the same time as all the kids are trying to go to school, trying to walk to school, bike to school, all the other traffic coming to the school. So a commercial, even though it might generate more traffic total during the day, I think it's going to be a time shifted, and that would be a more appropriate way to have less effect from the development. Thank you.
Questions, discussion? Seeing none, we have a motion. Again, we're going to be voting by hands. All in favor, raise your hand.
Councilmember Jensen, Councilmember Rennie, Councilmember Leonardis, Vice Mayor Syak, and Mayor Barbara Spector.
All right, the motion passes unanimously. I have a second motion, which is that if this application is continued in any form back to the Planning Commission, that it be commercial. And I don't think that the council can designate or dictate the financial obligation on the applicant. But if there is any way to blend what has already been paid with what needs to be paid, and that can be done, I would say I would encourage that. So we have a motion. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor. I will second that motion.
Motion and a second. Discussion. Ms. Syak.
Actually, forgive me, but could you clarify the motion when you say blend the payments? Which payments?
That means I don't really know how staff does its financial, but if there is any way that the applicant would not have to start all over again with brand-new fees, to give that consideration.
And then if I may I ask a question of staff?
Certainly.
So if this project moves forward as commercial, as it's currently designated, so there's no zone change, no plan development, can you clarify what those fees are? Does it make a difference if it's a brand-new application versus?
So we could pursue it on a time and materials basis as well, if that's what the council is directing. It may actually cost more than the application material, the application fees for a conforming commercial development, but we could take that into consideration as well.
And what I would suggest as part of my motion is that consideration as to the most financially reasonable or feasible be considered, and you can look at the blending and you can look at the straight cost. Ms. Jensen.
Question for the maker of the motion. I'm in support of the motion, but I wanted to make sure that I understood the intent of the motion. It's my understanding that the maker of the motion is contemplating a new application, not that this is somehow continued or a direction to Planning Commission.
I understand in response, and I understand that assuming that it were commercial, assuming that the applicant goes forward, I understand that it would be a new application.
Thank you.
Ms. Manager.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify a little bit more for the fees. I think clearly we've got some environmental work that's already been done. So to the extent new environmental or additional environmental work needs to be done for a commercial project, we would certainly build upon what has already been done and not lose the investment that's already been made, because we don't know what kind of commercial project it's going to be. We don't know if it's going to require a hearing before the Planning Commission or maybe back to you. So we will certainly look at all the considerations to make it financially fair given the investment to date.
And that is part of my motion. Further discussion. Ms. Syak.
Okay, I'll just weigh in. I will be in support of the motion. And I know, Mr. Plotz, you had asked for specific feedback, and I guess not trying to be flip, but it sounds kind of funny just to say, follow the general plan, but I think in essence, that's what we're saying. It's zoned commercial. I think you heard feedback that that's the desired. In fact, there were specific recommendations given. And I think you have an opportunity to turn the corner, so to speak, and make something that people could be excited about if it's something that really fits in with the neighborhood. And I do want to thank you on behalf of a soccer mom that has used your parking lot. Thank you for that. And hopefully we can continue to provide something that is of benefit to everyone.
Further discussion? Okay, see none. I will have the vote again by show of hands. All in favor?
Councilmember Jensen, Councilmember Rennie, Councilmember Leonardis, Vice Mayor Syak, and Mayor Barbara Spector.
All right, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody. The meeting is adjourned.